Hello, internet friends, and welcome to episode number 151 of Final Boss TV, your wild game rating show. I'm your host. My name is Adam K, aka Bay, and today we're finally talking about my spec. And it always comes up like, why is enhancement so late in the rotation? Where is enhancement? Well, I made a discussion video about this when the new patch came out, all the changes happened. But because I stream all the time and talk about enhancement, it's always kind of gets pushed to later thing. I put things in front of it because that is more important. Because you can always ask me stupid questions all the time about this damn spec and how much it's changed. But that's why it's finally today. We only have one more major show left in the first pass junket for Legion. We have Brewmaster Monk coming up next Sunday. Then I'll be gone for a few weeks, and then we're taking some shows off. And then basically the next show starts with the pre-BlizzCon special on October the 29th, I believe, off the top of my head. And then there'll be a post-BlizzCon show, and then we'll be starting back up again with all the shows again. And all of the shows in the future, as far as we can get before the end of Legion, I suppose, will be individual specs. We'll start with mages, hunters, rogues, and warlocks to give them all individual spec shows down the line. So that's going to be happening. You've asked for it, so it's happening. But outside of that, a quick early shout out, of course, to the people that make this possible. The assistant producers of Final Boss TV and everyone else that helps support the show over on the Patreon channel. Troffles, Ludovicus, Taislin, R4, Dalthier, Quen, Vrez, and a side nod to Poke for the temporary assistant producer support. Thank you very much for that. If you are curious and want more of the show, that exists over on the Patreon page, linked down below. There are BTS podcasts that are posted there. You can go check out. These are unscripted, sort of behind the scenes, just jibber-jabbering, ranting, talking about the show, and setting up for it. There's also show notes. Those are listed there as well if you want to follow along with those. And there's other BTS things that pop up, like work in progress sort of things. But one thing I want to make sure I plug here, this is a brand new, I just did this the other day over the weekend. The first 12 podcasts in the BTS category now are all available to any pledge. So you can toss the show $1. And if you were curious about how these podcasts worked out, you can go check those out there. Again, there are 12 of them that are now available for just the basic Patreon pledge. Anyone, $1, $2, whatever. There's 12 of them. You can go check those out over on the channel. Just hit that play button. Go for it from right there. Additionally, if you've missed any of the past shows, you can go check out all the shows on our YouTube channel. Those are listed down below. They're listed by the year. So you can go subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out all of these shows as they go and as we finish up this first big pass and go back in time. The funny part, we're about to see a guest on the show multiple times. Who's this face right here? Look at this little butterface. Who's this little youngling right here? Look at this guy. He looks very different on the show today. I didn't believe my eyes either. And of course, if you want to support the show and keep it going, the subscribe button is right here on Twitch. It's like right there. Or you can follow the channel here, of course. But that's enough blabbing about me. I have a manager now. I have to talk about this kind of stuff. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble. But because I don't want to wait any longer and I need to show chat, Wordup is here. Hello, sir. Welcome back to talk about stuff.
It's been a while. All the way back since Hellfire.
Well, on the show proper. We just talked about 725 recently.
Yeah, that's true. But you didn't get to see my my new look.
Your conquistador look. He looks like a pirate. Look at this guy. Well, I don't know. Could Brits be pirates?
I don't even play Outlaw.
Oh, that's a WoW joke. Yeah, because you're playing Assassination right now.
That's just awkward, yeah. Yeah, I am. Not Enhancement. And that has to get out there, I suppose, really early.
So why are you on the show?
Because no one gets to play Enhancement in the latest tune now, do they?
That's very true. Joining us on the fresh meat side of things, there's Rusah. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hello.
And you're also not playing Enhancement later on in Tomb, are you?
Not later on. Currently, not playing, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's not out of choice.
I'm sure we'll get into that.
We're just being forced out of it.
Yeah,
well, I mean, that's not true. I could choose to stay Enhancement. I would just be on the bench.
that's not to open the show off with some like initial salt, but that's going to be part of the show is digging into, this came up on the Method show last week, the state of the current tier we're in and what specs actually work right now. And it's very noticeable that certain ones just don't. One of them being ours, unfortunately. So it's very, very sad. Hopefully that isn't the case in Antorus, the Burning Throne. Is that the longest raid name we've ever had? I think so.
Ooh.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Lei Shen, the Thunder King. That one was pretty long.
Well, that's just the name of the boss. Antorus, the Burning Throne, is the name of the raid. It's all one.
Terrace of Endless Spring was pretty long.
The actual raid, yeah.
That's true. That is true. But I'll go back around the table here and go back to Rusah real quick because you're new to this whole shebang. So what do you do in our little WoW sphere for enhancement? Like what do you dabble in, sir? I
do a lot of behind the scenes stuff. I do a lot of I guess theory crafting, you could typically call it nowadays. I've taken over supporting and maintaining all of the Simcraft module stuff for Enhancement Shaman. Big shout out to Nav and all the work he's done for years and years, and the massive amounts of work that he did for all of the beta and up until now. And even now, he still finds little things and throws them in there on his own. But huge shout out to his support up until earlier this year. I took over. I do a lot of discussing with people about thoughts for the last 3 or 4 major patches. I've been trying to compile feedback from the community and other top enhancement shamans and trying to get that out to Blizzard, which we saw a lot of success in the last patch, and hang out on the enhanced Discord, try to help people out, to answer questions. Yeah, I'm trying to support the community, support the spec.
Yeah, I was bringing up, I mean to cut you off, I was just excited. I'm bringing up the 7.3 class discussion we have, just plugging the number of us that have been part of this. I started the first one way back in 7.1, I think, and then you've made and compiled all of them since then. So it's been a wild ride. I think that's about right, yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and granted, mostly ups, but there are still some, which every spec can probably talk about, is that a lot of interesting things, but these threads do really well. So appreciate the work you guys put into those and keeping those compiled moving forward.
Well, and those wouldn't also be successful without the community. So many people have come out and had positive things to say and very productive things to say. And, that went a really long way towards getting, Blizzard's attention. I think the civility of all of that discussion was I was very surprised and pleased by.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense, because some of the specs threads aren't very nice.
Ooh, yeah.
Which that doesn't get
more hostile.
That doesn't get anything done.
Buff single target, increased survivability.
Yeah. But then tossing it over to this pirate on the show today. Wordup, what do you do if anyone doesn't know who you are? Refresh them on who the heck.
I've now I maintain guides on Icy Veins and Wowhead, but I used to maintain them on everywhere, and had Google Docs and spreadsheets and things like that. There's not as many now because there's so many different things that you can't really spreadsheet out as easily. But I keep all the guides up to date. I did a lot of YouTube stuff, which has tailed off with how intensive Tomb and Legion in general is with just keeping up, but I'm going to ease back into that. And do a lot of stuff with Discord, like Rusah, a lot of like Q&A with people, helping people one-on-one with the spec, and generally just being as stubborn as possible that enhancement is good until it isn't quite, and then just being as quiet as possible so no one notices.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure we bring that to a head, is that this doesn't happen with every spec and or class out there, but you maintain and sort of mirror both the Icy Veins and Wowhead guides for enhancement, because that's always a question that I get in chat, like, which guide do I look at? Which one is accurate? So thankfully, due to all the hours you put into coding all this in the back end, they're the same, essentially.
Well, yeah, aside from the fact that they can't be identical, all the information is as that is consistent, at least. So there's not like a few other classes have like disconnects between them, which confuses people. Most of the time, if you go to one, it's going to be the same as the other. Maybe like a little bit of difference here or there in the wording, but it's going to be the same. So I think that's been really helpful for us, that there's a lot less varying sources that conflict with each other that make it difficult to just get the right answer.
Right. Yeah. Because as there are blog sites that have built up, or like the Warlock one-stop shop that it grows, and with the evolution of Discord and the propagation of information, that is really helpful. But these are still really mainstays. But it always gets to a point in every expansion where one of the other two major guides, Wowhead or Icy Veins, are always like way out of date, and everyone's like, "Don't look at that; it's garbage." And then we're like, "Well, where do I look then?"
Yeah, well, it's been a lot of work keeping them up to date, because we've changed a lot, and it's instead of like in WoD where it was like 6 months and you'd have a long time to prepare, it's been like you've got a month, you've got to get everything ready again, and then change everything again. But I think it's been a lot better that there's just everything's all similar, because in WoD there was the same problem where people will go, do I look at this guide or this guide or this guide? And different people like different ones, and then everyone gets confused, and you just end up like having a lot of wasted discussion with people because you fundamentally have read different resources.
Yeah. So outside of that, plugging all of these things, we have the 7.3, and I'll link this stuff in the description box on YouTube, and we'll toss some links in chat here. There is something else that is being built, Rusah, that we could at least forcibly talk about on the show right now to make sure that it gets created and finished, maybe?
Yeah, I'm like 90% of the way done with it. I'm at the point where really I just need to get off my butt and get over the finish line. But I've got a website, blog site that so many other sites, specs have, basically meant to be a front end kind of aggregate, either links to guides or just random thoughts or expanding on certain common questions or ideas that people have. So we're working on a website that probably be live in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Site's mostly done. I just need to finish styling, actually start writing some content on it, and then get a host. But folks can look for that in the next couple weeks. We'll probably get an announcement in the Earthshrine Discord and maybe in some guides here and there. It's going to be stormstrike.io. So we'll have that up in the next couple weeks.
You can put that right next to your Storm, Earth, and Lava website for your elemental, and then your enhancement, and then, as far as I know, the stuff that's still being done on Chain Heal. We'll have a website for all 3 specs.
I'm sure the Resto and the LA guys will be happy to have a site they can point other people at.
Right.
Because they've been asking off and on, like, hey, where's the enhancement site? Hey, what do you guys got? We're like, nothing at the moment.
It's Wordup's Google document. Just go to that.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's what it used to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have that come in the next couple weeks, and we'll build some nice feeds for some cross spec stuff with Chain Healed and Storm, Earth, and Lava. So
this is a side question before we bring up a giant meaty part of the first part of the show. Here is that obviously Simcraft is a thing. You mentioned Simcraft, and you're responsible, as well as a few others, for making our module. And then that, of course, now you can use...
Well, I don't know about responsible, but...
yeah. But then that gets then used through raid bots in the cloud. If you don't know what raid bots is, you go check that out. I'll be making a guide on how to use raid bots in the future. But that's a way to more tangibly understand and use Simcraft. But then in the raid bot stuff, we brought this up on the Healer shows recently, the WoW Analyzer tool, and I've been asked this a few times, is there going to be a module or a setting that we'll eventually have for enhancement to track on the WoW Analyzer tool, or is that what is the status on that one? Do we know?
We've discussed this before, and I'm pretty sure all of us have been approached individually. WoW Analyzer is a great tool for predictable or measurable type things. The issue with enhancement is there's just too many randomized kind of variables that you can't really analyze well, because there's too many reasons why it may or may not have happened. Like a simple example is, maybe you look and you wasted 15% of your Stormbringer procs. But that could be as of absolutely no fault of your own. That could have been for one of many different things. So, it's difficult to come up with a tool that can accurately say, here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you can be doing better, outside of simple things like, is your flame time uptime or flame tongue uptime good, or are you properly hitting cooldowns together, or are you missing casts of a cooldown? Simple stuff like that. Yeah, but I don't know that there's a whole lot of real effective, like, deep dive analysis that can be done.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really like something for us specifically, that there's a lot of little things like this was really big with the feedback that we gave leading into this patch, that there are things that make it really difficult to actually visibly know why you did good or bad, and there's no like feedback on that to the player. So the reason that you did, I don't know, 50k less this pull could be because you didn't proc Unleash Doom at all for like the whole of Bloodlust, and that was it. And that was out of your control. There's nothing you could do. That was random, and you played around all the procs that did happen, but you couldn't have made it proc more. You didn't play wrong per se. You just didn't get it at the right time, and that's just the nature of how the spec works. And it's not like that's the only thing. There's enough other little procs that if they happen at the right time or the wrong time, that's a huge swing, and that's just like the nature of the spec.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like, the analyzer tool really works well, and we looked at it on the last couple of healer shows where the healing specs can really get a lot of tactile information out of it, because usually they have less, hopefully, due to the fact that healers don't like the RNG, they have less things that just like get in the way, and they can get some really, really awesome analytical information about like uptimes and percentages and mana usage and missed heals and overhealing percentage or whatever, and it's really neat. But there are some specs, maybe in the future it could be a thing. I know some DPS specs are on the analyzer tool, but it's very few as they slowly build them in. But just more tools. These things didn't exist a few years ago, so it's neat to see at least the evolution of how that is all building up.
Well, I would say if the community demand is for a simpler tool for things like just buff up times and the real simple kind of checklist stuff, then I'm sure that could get built out. But at the end of the day, I don't know how useful, I don't know how much information a player would be expecting you to get out of that tool for enhancement specifically.
Okay. So that's why I bring that up.
Maybe there'll be something, but probably not.
It was just a big thing that comes up sometimes with our specs and other ones about, and it goes for a lot of different specs too. And I'm sure it's a question that gets brought up some ways because everyone sort of wants to know in the broader scope of things, but whatever this kind of in depth in the BTS podcast too, is that a lot of people just like to be told what to play, unfortunately, instead of like building and experimenting, understanding and growing and learning and practicing. So at the end of the day, there needs to be some like, this is the best, or you should do this kind of an answer to at least starter players. But I'm not going to bring that up right now because Wordup ranted about that for like 15 minutes last night.
Yeah, that's on the behind the scenes thing.
Yeah.
About that. But yeah, that's really something that I think a lot of the time with enhancement, just knowing how it works, just like from the guides or from speaking to people who play it, you're going to get more out of that than a tool that goes into your log and finds little things that you can really focus on. You get a lot out of just like spending a bit of time to read everything and check,
right,
and just follow that.
So the big first meaty section of the show I want to bring up is we're kind of going to harken back to the current situation we're sitting in with 7.2.5, and the 2.5 patches, the 0.5s rather, are really huge, normally focused class changes, even though they're doing more of those in the next patch, which isn't a 0.5 because Feral and Frost DK are getting quite a bit, but whatever. I always look at this when I was looking at the patch notes, and it's a huge list. I'm not going to read this whole damn thing, but just to bring it up from the cliff notes on the Icy Veins guide that Wordup put together, I mean, everyone got 2 new legendaries. We had all core damage increased by 10%. Earth and Spike was upped. Hailstorm was upped. Fury of Air was upped. Numerous talents were reworked and moved. Landslide, Boulder Fist, Ascendance. Crash Lightning went up. Hot Hand, proc rate went down to make it comparable with the 15 tier. Wind Surge was changed. Wind Strikes was changed. all this is a massive. I mean, my list on my notes is actually longer. Like, look at this. What is this? So, was this? It was all necessary though, right? Word up. Like, what did 725 fix the major problems that we were dealing with in Legion up until this point?
When it comes to the damage toolkit, it was probably one of the most successful, like, mid-expansion reworks of a spec I've ever seen, not just Legion. Because we had some real fundamental problems that I thought were, like, so big that they wouldn't get fixed until the next expansion kind of thing. But they listened to the feedback that we gave. They had a really good back and forth with us over something, especially with the really big changes like Stormbringer and Tempest and how they worked. They really did actually engage with us, even though we weren't intended to have big changes this patch. And we came out of the gates with a really, really good rework on some really serious problems. Mm-hmm. And I think virtually everything that was changed was necessary, and it was pretty on point. Like, they hit the numbers right for most things. Still a couple of things here, like Hailstorm still isn't really, because it's got fundamental problems. But that's the kind of thing that is forgivable, and it's like, it's not like it's going to break the spec. They fixed the real problems that really impact having fun in the game.
Which I think that the biggest one, which I believe that every enhancement shaman out there can ring true, is Ascendance. Finally isn't garbage, because all up in this point it was just total crap.
Amongst other talents, it's not just Ascendance. And real quick, going back to kind of touching on something Word said there, was initially we were not slated for any kind of changes at all in 725. They maybe publicly said we are not looking at unwinding these problems in the middle of the expansion. But then they turned around and did the opposite. I think that they started digging into it and realizing themselves, like, okay, yeah, there's some serious issues here. And so we're really appreciative that Blizzard, listened to the feedback and worked with us on it. Ascendance was one that we pushed heavily on because it had been, for lack of a better word, worthless the entire expansion. Mm-hmm. We found out once we actually started digging into the rework, because they started changing Ascendance in the beta or in the PTR. We started finding all sorts of bugs with it. Certain things didn't work. Windlash didn't count as full auto attacks, so it wasn't proccing our core class mechanic. Like, there was just so many little issues with it that we looked back and we said, wow, this was actually like a significant DPS loss for taking it. And that's the way we always felt when trying it out occasionally on live. You would spec Ascendance, and it's supposed to be a big button that, really like amps up your gameplay. But, on live before 725, every time you push it, the entire spec just grinds to a halt. You feel like nothing's happening. You feel like you get no procs. Your damage just plummets. And so yeah, we found there was a lot of little issues that they were able to get in and fix. But then the fundamental issue with Ascendance was it just didn't do anything for us. Its design was to generate essentially more Maelstrom at a time that we were like heavily overflow. Like, we didn't care about the resource. So we're really happy they turned it a lot more similar to Elemental, where it's just this rapid fire, wind strike, high reactiveness, really high power ability. I genuinely think it's one of the better cooldowns in the game right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ascendance now is really fun. It's especially comes to a head with the gloves. Just
Definitely.
Getting to have it up all the time, it's just a really, really fun cooldown. And the little unique thing of being at range never was like that big of a deal in the past, but this tier round, I've noticed it a lot.
I heavily
so many
utilize
times
that on Mistress. There are times that like fourth fish, I'll pick up the fish. I hit Ascendance. I don't move in because I don't want to I don't want to get hit. I want to lose that buff. It's really noticeable the utility it gives.
Oh yeah, because originally it and this is part of the contention point with that, and I think as I bring this up, of course, we're all going to go like, and the enhanced ones out there are going to have a problem with the fact that we lost, well, which we lovingly call Rad Blast, which was Storm Blast, which was when it turned Storm Strike into Storm Blast, the range, super chain lightning, scaling with mastery.
Scaling, yeah.
because we have like a little wind disc nonsense now, wind strike, which is very, very, very underwhelming in comparison. But at least the new version of Ascendance, reducing the cooldown and cost of Storm Strike, a la Wind Strike, by 80%, really has at least a machine gun style, like super heavy wind disc feel when you get those chain procs over and over and over again.
It feels a lot better, that's for sure.
Yeah. I don't understand. This is like a really personal thing. I don't know why the glyph of Ascendance disappeared, because I want to be an elemental panda. Damn it! But, sorry. That needs to come back. Especially with the gloves, I want to just snap into Lightning Panda instead of turning into that stupid, junky, old Cataclysm model that's so broken. It's just like, that's all it does when it attacks. That's a little bit of salt. That's fine. Maybe we'll get it back at 8.0. I don't know.
And then they also fixed Earthen Spike as well to go with it. And that talent was literally never good since they put it in the game. Like the entirety of alpha, beta, it was just not good.
It suffered from the same problem. It was a DPS loss to use it. It was worth not taking a talent.
Yeah, it was kind of like there wasn't the room to use it in the rotation, and when you did use it, you basically had to cross your fingers that you'd get procs during it, otherwise it was just completely worthless. And the increase that it gave, not that great. But now you've got Earthen Spike where you're pretty likely to get some procs inside it. It's going to line up with Doom Winds, which is pretty good. And you've got the gloves now where you got like a crazy high roll of the gloves proccing just as you Earthen Spike, and then you get like 10 seconds of extreme burst, which is really, really fun if you want to like go for that gamble with your talents, because there's finally now in the tree an actual flex pick on a talent tree where it's what you want for different fights, instead of what we've had in the past where it was like you take this, and this, and that's your talents for everything, and you don't change.
We had, and that comes up on every show. We had a very definitive build through like all the way up to Helia before they did the first like huge hammer down, because apparently Enhancement was too good. We were too good right before Mythic Helia became a thing, and then they crushed us, and we were like for all of the rest of Mythic Helia and all of Nighthold. Basically, we're just like, eh.
I think at the time somebody did some analysis of the percent utilization of different talents, like right at the end, like right before 715. And I think that Enhance and Rep Paladins were the two least diverse specs in the entire game at the time, as far as talent choices go.
I believe it. I mean, not trying to throw shade at our Rep Pally friends, but we had their show, and they definitely iterated on the fact that they have very few options even now. So it hasn't changed much for them, unfortunately. But maybe in 7.3, they have a little bit of coming changes with their wing nerf to their relic and all that kind of stuff. But so far for 7.3 for us, all we have is like a 4% aura tune-up, but it doesn't include our artifact Goldens, Feral Spirits, or Hailstorm, resulting in a less than actual 4% aura. So what?
It actually, that is something that they added and fixed in 7.2.5. That was a significant problem that we had. Enhancement got its aura dialed up a significant amount, up around 34% before they baked it all in baseline. And when they did that, they actually rolled Hailstorm, Feral Spirits. They rolled everything into the spec, so everything counts now. So that 4% tune-up does for sure affect Feral Spirit and Hailstorm. Offhand, I'm like 90% sure that it counts for Doom Winds, or for Unleash Doom and
Doom Vortex.
Yeah, Doom Vortex. I kept wanting to call it Doom Nova.
Don't do it.
Doom Vortex, Doom Nova. I'm like 99% sure it affects those, but yeah, that was a problem before, but thankfully they resolved that.
Okay,
that was the problem. I think they didn't realize in some cases that it wasn't there and it needed to be. Because I believe when we brought it up, they added it in very quickly after.
They were really hesitant to give Hailstorm any kind of buffs, because I think internally they were saying, Hailstorm should be strong, but the problem was it just kept falling so far behind everything else. Yeah, it caused us a lot of grief.
This came to my mind right now. I don't know how much we've really dived in or how much you guys have dived into the math in 7.3 coming on the future. And we're just kind of future casting a little bit here because obviously we're maybe weeks, if not a month plus more away or something like that. But the Netherlight Crucible giving us a free 15 eye levels, and because Hailstorm is weapon damage, that's basically a hidden buff to Hailstorm, which I know some Enhancement Shamans want to use again and use and feel healthy about, but it's tough to have that on the same tier as Ancestral Swiftness, because 6% flat multiplicative haste is a lot as we gain more gear too, and as they keep not putting haste on our gear, we need to shore it up somewhere else. But is that...
Yeah, I can't see Hailstorm and the number that it has right now beating Swiftness, just as long as haste remains good, because obviously that weapon damage we're gaining is going to buff up the Storm Strikes and the Lava Lashes that we're getting from the haste, which means that Hailstorm's just got a real issue that it requires extra input to make use of, and downtime kills it. If you get downtime in the wrong time after refreshing it, it is really bad. That can cripple the talent. Whereas with Ancestral Swiftness, it's not as bad because you don't need to refresh anything. You just do your rotation a little bit faster, you get a little bit more procs, and you can't mess up Ancestral Swiftness.
Right.
It also sits in this awkward balancing phase, like even just outside of the gameplay, it sits in this awkward balancing problem with one of our legendary rings, the Eye of Twisting Nether, and the wrist, the Lava Lash wrist Akanu's, where it has this issue where they can't tune Hailstorm up too much without making those requisite legendaries like too powerful. It's this really awkward place where if they make it strong by itself, it's way too strong with the legendary combinations, and if they make it too weak, nobody plays it outside of those legendaries. So it's this very strange design, like in this strange design space that I think they'll probably like totally either remove or remove that dependency in the next expansion.
Yeah, you bring up that sort of a counter argument, but it's weird because a lot of the other specs in the game that have like resource modifying legendaries that are always good, that have no drawbacks, like the Arms Pants or the Havoc Ring, even though they've been nerfed, they're still good because they always have a use, they always have a benefit. Whereas we have these like these ones that have to have stipulations to even turn on, that then even when we turn them on because of back-end numbers aren't the best performing wise ones. So it's such a damn annoying thing to keep hearing about, and which is that it's weird. I guess that's the only thing I can say. And I don't know how they internally figure out the numbers on how they feel that that's okay, because at this point now we have so many legendaries across the whole game, right? You have so many. I mean, 13 for your main spec, I think, at this point, or something like that. 12, 13. And it comes down to like you only care about 2, maybe 3. It's unfortunate.
I think we're one of the specs that have actually got a bit more options with our legendaries. We've got quite a lot that we can just use that aren't awful. So they're not exactly exciting, a lot of them, but they work. You could make use of them. You could probably rank pretty well if you wanted to do that. You could use them for certain bosses and they wouldn't be terrible. It's less of a gulf between the ones that are really good and everything else that is garbage, which happens to be for quite a common thing with a lot of specs.
That's very true. But we'll move on from that. We'll talk more about and get like a breakdown of legendaries and all that kind of good gobbledygook later on in the show. But I want to bring up I don't know. The chat was making fun of us a little bit earlier. I mean, every show that comes on is always like, oh, I hope they're ready to, is it gonna be another wine fest or whatever. But the major point that comes up about enhancement right now, and which I talked about in the pre-opening, the little amble thing, that it just, so the buffs and changes and fixes and improvements we had were a lot numerically, but in all of our years on enhancement, and then we get to the Tomb of Sargeras, and different roster changes can happen at the end of a tier. But the fact that to actually progress properly and not be a hindrance to your group, like Wordup is playing Rogue for Avatar and Kill Jaden. Rusah's playing Hunter for Avatar and Kill Jaden. I will probably need to play Havoc for Avatar and Kill Jaden. So why is that a thing? And what we can't do anything about it. So Word, what is your rant side of this? Go for it.
I don't think it's just us on this one. Like, this isn't like oh, woe is me, I'm enhancement, I have to reroll.
Sure.
This is like I'm not a rogue, I have to reroll, which is kind of a bit like the only ones that are really comfortably not in that camp exactly is maybe Arms, and that's just because they were doing pretty obscene damage at the time. They've since been toned down a bit, so I mean it's questionable, but it's just that the way that the tail end of Tomb is structured, rogues are just, it doesn't matter how much damage they're doing and what the gap is, they just trivialize way more stuff that means that you can have an easier time on the fight. And that's because our damage is really good. We can compete. We could do really well on Avatar, damage wise. But the question is, can we live? And can we live whilst making it easier for everyone else in the raid to live? And the answer to that is like a resounding no. We absolutely can't, especially not to the level of a rogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just don't bring anything but pure damage. I mean, I'm confident that any of us could, come into Avatar on our shamans and be probably top boss damage. We would crush it. But you don't do anything for the raid, and it's Avatar's been nerfed to the point. Well, some say nerfed, some say fixed, whichever you choose. To the point now where the damage check isn't as severe. There are guilds now that are pushing the boss to like almost 20%, and some past 20%, and having to kill off the maiden early intentionally. That the damage check just isn't as relevant in Avatar right now. So it's the point where you end up doing more raid DPS, like as a raid, by saving everyone else a lot of grief by being able to deal with mechanics. And that's exactly what rogues and unholy DKs and holy paladins, demon hunters to a lesser extent. That's what all these classes, melee classes, can do. So I mean, maybe there's like one, slot that you could swap an enhancement in for maybe a warrior. Like there's like one, maybe two selfish melee DPS slots you could put in. But why do that when we have other players in my raid roster that can both do good boss damage and fill that raid utility role? So I basically just look at the option, I could be stubborn and stay on my shaman and sit on the bench, or I could, contribute and play my hunter. So it's just, we just don't bring enough outside of boss damage. And it's a fight where it doesn't matter as much.
Right. That's just the thing with those last two fights, that there's, with all the other bosses in Tomb, you can outplay the way that the mechanics work, and you can take less damage, or you can structure your raids so it's not that bad. But with those last two, you can't really outplay the sheer amount of things that keep coming on a shaman. Like on a rogue, I can press feint and I can stand still in chaos. I can press feint and I can soak a touch. I am virtually immortal, whereas on my shaman, I'm extremely fragile, and I can't really do anything to mitigate that. I haven't got anything really to do, so I just would flop over.
I'll bring this up, and we have two things we could show for visual aids to support this issue. And whereas we're not trying to like bring up and just whine in our regard, right, for enhancement, but there are some really incredibly dire things with the defensive style and how Blizzard wants to make these raids harder and make them challenging and bring in diverse, I would say diverse with air quotes, because in Tomb of Sargeras, 7 of 9 bosses have soak mechanics, not very diverse. But so we made a document. Well, I didn't make a document. This is Rusah and the other Shambros mostly put this all together. We had some discussion about it, trying to figure out like what we should include. But this is just a rough little Google document that shows a difference in defensives that many of the main currently played specs have. And there is a sheer difference in a very particular column versus everything else. Whereas this, and Shaman is for all 3 Shaman specs. All we have...
Yes and no. Resto has a few passive things
they
that
do
rely on.
But realistically...
Yeah.
Yeah.
there are a couple things missing from this list. This is not meant to track like every single defensive option, no matter how small. And there's a little note down there that every hybrid has on GC targeted heals, so that's in there. This is mainly just to show like the bulk of class like raid defensive utilization abilities.
It's like the proactive tools that you have to survive.
Right.
And we have a distinct lack of them now, which is really stark for us because we used to have a lot in the past. Like in Mists, we had, I actually can't even remember, we had like 6 or 7 different ways to just flat reduce the amount of damage we take. Whereas now we have one, which is really, really odd. Because we used to have things we just press them because I might take some damage. We'll throw it out there. That'd be great. And now we're like having to really carefully plan when we use our one single button that might stop us from dying.
Yeah.
And that doesn't prevent you from getting another, like Sisters is a great example. It's totally possible to get like 3 things in a row on Sisters, like 45 seconds apart. You say you use it expertly on the first one, you save your life, you take like very minimal damage. 45 seconds later, you got nothing but running around and spamming Healing Surge and hoping to God that you have enough Maelstrom.
Yeah, Bink in chat brings up the fact too, and this is mostly for our elemental brothers and sisters and ourselves, the fact that our artifact defensive traits are all like auto heal yourself or make healing better, but that's not a defensive.
Yeah, like the big problem is that our artifact traits and part of our defense is reactive healing tools, and that's great for dungeons or open world or like lower end raids, but the higher you go, the more proactive defense is useful because something that's going to kill you is only going to not kill you if you have something to reduce the amount that it deals. And healing does nothing when you're dead on floor, which you will be for a lot of things.
Yep.
I mean, I guess on the one sense, though, it's a good thing that now, after the patch, the only thing that we have a major qualm with is our defense. Because a lot of other classes aren't happy about where their damage sits. But it's funny that we're completely happy with where our damage sits, and we'd like to be able to use it. We just can't because of our kit and the raids.
Because we'll die.
Yeah, there's just no compelling reason to bring us other than pure damage. And on fights where that's useful, it's great. But as you can see, the fights where it's not, it's there's just a little bit of a bad spot.
So the other argument to bring up to compound to this, and this is why, again, this is not, and Discords or chat or YouTube comments are like, oh, they're just salty whiners. This is like a fundamental problem that Blizzard has developed in reverse that they haven't been able to fix yet. In the 7.3 posts that Rusah's compiled with everyone else, there's a list of things we've lost since MOP. So we've lost Shamanistic Rage. We've lost our tier 15 defensives. So Stone and Bulwark Totem, Astral Shift being a talent, or Nature's Guidance. We've lost Primal Earth Elemental. We've lost the Lightning Shield Glyph. We've lost the Spirit healing, the Feral Spirit healing. We've lost the Flame Shock healing. All we've gained is Astral Shift and the Elemental Healing artifact trait.
We also lost the Healing Stream Glyph.
Well, yeah,
which was also technically also raid utility because that was doing it to other people as well.
Well, that's
just randomly hit a bunch of people, give them a nice DR.
Well, no, that's the next step. We lost the raid utility skills we've removed since MOP. We lost Stormlash Totem, which is just damage. We lost Grounding and Tremor. We've lost Healing Stream Totem with the glyph that gives you the when it heals you get that 6 seconds of elemental damage reduction. Healing Tide Totem, Ancestral Guidance, and Healing Rain. We converted to Rainfall talent now, but it competes with mobility instead of competing with defensives. And then we gained Windrush Totem, which is a crappier form of Guardian Druid Roar, or even.
It's still good.
It's still good.
It's still good and still useful, which is something that a lot of people try to not admit. But I really like it.
No, it's fine. But we've gained 1 raid sprint for all of this that we've lost. Like,
yeah, it's not a fair trade.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I just traded you 12 rare Pokemon cards for 1. That's totally okay. I'll take the 1.
The ultimate problem is, I think this was in the podcast last night, but the real problem is that there's no talent options and there's no extra ways of us to get the defense. There's no choice for more. So if you feel like I need to survive more on this fight, well, that sucks because your option is to get a different type of movement tool on this tree. And That's it. And a lot of other classes, they've got an option where they feel like, I'm going to die, I need to not die. I will take this thing that will make me not die, and I've made the right choice. And we don't get that, which is really odd, I think, to me. When we've got a tier of talents that are all CC in varying forms of the same, that's odd.
It is. It's very strange, because our totem tier is a lot of very similar stuff. It's a AoE sheep or AoE root and a slow or an AoE stun. Like they have different resources and choices, sure, but then our only quote unquote defensives, Rainfall, if you can call it that, it's been buffed 3 times and it's not awful terrible, but it's not great. Competes with raid movement and personal movement. There's no defensive here. There's no, and you can look in so many other talent tiers, and we did this last night looking at the BTS podcast. And there's like 2 other specs out of 36 in the game that join us in this like no option, and that's just not. I don't get that. That's just like
the thing with Rainfall is, you know, we actually have. There's a fight right now where Rainfall should be good. Desolate Host, if you're downstairs when the Soul Queen is doing her what is it, the Wailing Souls?
Yeah.
You know, the whole raid's taking consistent damage. People aren't topped up. Rainfall should do a lot of healing. That should be a great example where we have raid utility. But, you know, I tried it out for a couple pulls in progression, and it was okay. It was doing like, you know, 25, maybe 30 million healing if I kept it down for the entire duration of each wailing phase. But even then, it was just not noticeable. Like our healers didn't really seem to care. You know, it didn't seem to really help. I mean, it's better than nothing, but my time spent on those GCDs would have been better just hitting the boss. Right. And it's like a talent that I feel needs to be substantially buffed to be like burst healing. Because you compare it to a couple other specs, like Elemental has AG still, which is world superior. Shadow Priests have VE, which is really powerful. It's like Rainfall as a talent should be powerful in what it does. It's just not.
Nope.
Like that's a great opportunity for that to be a good utility, like raid utility, and it's there's just so much missing from those 2 talent tiers that.
I mean, the totem talent tier that we have now. I mean, if you remember, a lot of the feedback of the old totem talent tier in MOP and WOD, that was one of the crowning talent tiers that everyone said, "Why does this exist?" Because like some of them are just useless, and most people don't even really care which one they have. It's just like a tier of dead talents, and it was exchanged out for the current totem talent tier, which is in fact the exact same situation where you take Lightning Surge totem and you never really take the others unless you want to do something cute, and most of the time it's just not important or like noticeable. And so you traded useless for useless. It's not really a good thing.
Nope. Well, now we have the AG counter argument. You know, is AG powerful? I mean, Rafflecopter. Well, I would rather take AG in situations where you can actually AoE and cleave to buff up its actual output to do something versus taking a wet puddle on the ground that actually does nothing. Like the best use of Healing Rain is the Brawlers Guild, sort of.
It was good really... on Croesus. That was the last time that it was relevant. And that was because you were under healing and everyone was taking constant damage. So it was always getting value.
And you
even
had
then,
free
it wasn't
GCDs
that
to
good.
cast it too. Like you had free GCs to cast it while the bridge was smashing. So you could just drop it down with 0 penalty. And Feral Lunge wasn't going to do you much good. Maybe Wind Rush if people are slow moving on bridges. But I mean... Yeah, it's
that takes a lot. Like,
I think
get it to be good.
I think they're just really scared of buffing it to a point where we go back to Throne of Thunder, where enhancement healing was absolutely absurd, and it was really fun. Like that was super fun to do. But yeah, I think they're just really worried about that level of utility and strength.
It's because the thing I wanted to end cap this too, and we have a flip side in the notes, right, where the biggest top point here, which enhancement is now really good at, is of course strong boss damage. Like we funnel AoE and cleave into boss damage. One of the few classes that can do that. Next to like sub rogues now, because they basically stole our niche. But like we have fights that we dominate boss damage. We have things we can really do and finagle, like if you abuse Sefu's on like Mistress or Desolate Host right now, which I wouldn't say abuse, it's using it properly. where we have these huge spikes to do great boss damage. And if that's our new thing, barely any utility, a little movement speed, a little healing, maybe, that's great. But then again, our boss damage is still not as good as classes that live forever. Unholy DKs. Like, they just shouldn't die if they move properly, because they have so much more than us in the kit. So they're just, that's the one thing I bring up that makes me just laugh, because we have great boss damage now, but there's still classes that are better. So what's the point?
We did ask in the feedback, like, for them to be more clear, what do they want us to do? Because we have pretty middling AoE. We did have a little bit of the cleave into single target thing, and that was definitely relevant, but it's way better now. Our AoE isn't dreadful, but it's not good. It's that, especially with the new tier, which is coming later, I think. That is a really good thing. It's been really healthy. But the boss damage we do now is, at least you notice. Like, you know that enhancement is supposed to do good boss damage, and they do good boss damage most of the time. And on Mistress and Host, I feel like we are really, really good at doing that. Specifically, that those are two fights that really worked for us. We're not as good as Sub, but that's because Sub is absurd on Mistress, and that's just sort of the short and long of it. But we've done well from those changes. Our damage is in a good place, which is usually the first thing that people think is the only thing to care about. But our damage is good. If we were more survivable, or we brought some more things, we'd totally be a more viable, like, buzzword spec for everyone. It's just that one little step that's missing.
Yeah, exactly, that thing. I was talking chat. It's called Unholy Endurance. Yeah, whatever. So, that's like the little bit of back and forth, positive, negative, I suppose, where we've come from now. I would... There's way more positives than negatives. It's just, a lot of it comes down to the raid design being around personal survivability and you handling a mechanic. And if you can't handle a mechanic, then you can't bring you. And it's a really real truth with these last two encounters. And it just sucks. It just stings for all the enhancement players out there that, you know, I'm going to be at Mythic Kill Jaden, you know, a number of weeks from now. So it's probably going to be nerfed again by then. I might not have to play Havoc, but I probably should anyway, because it'll still be better. Also have better defensives, mobility, and Netherwalk. I can't do any of that on my... Oh, there we go. Oh, so you're back. I don't know. So I guess expounding upon all of that real quick to end cap before we move on. Rusah, what would you like to see adjusted for enhancement, either now or looking to the 8.0? Like, what sort of like little things would you like to see fixed, changed, added?
Little things. I say a little thing, but it's a big thing. Just what do they want our AoE to be? Do they want it to be this just passive cleave that tunnels into single target? If that's what they want it to be, great. But then the resulting single target needs to reflect that. They've been slowly buffing and increasing Crash Lightning this expansion, and it feels like they're just afraid of getting it into a too unwieldy of a place. It just feels like feels like there's one thing missing to it. Crash Lightning by itself is great. It's a fun ability. We would like it to be a little more consistent and a little easier to target, but it works well with the kit. It's good at fueling more storm strikes. It's good at proccing, Wind Fury, Maelstrom generation, procs all your weapon imbues. It's a great ability. It's great design. It's just there's just that one thing missing, and T20 4-piece does a great job of like fulfilling that one piece. But when we lose the tier, we're gonna go back to just like being lame, piddly DPS, and so it feels like there needs to be a replacement there. Just something needs to be adjusted. So other than that, the obvious shout out for just please fix our defensives.
Yeah. Wordup, what do you think? What would you like to see adjusted either now or looking forward to 8.0?
I think that the AoE talent tier could use some love to be like the missing link between us and being able to do proper AoE when we want to. Because there's a lot of specs that can do good cleave and they can do good single target, but they can also switch that off and do AoE as well, but we can never really step into that sphere. And if that's not what they want, then I think that AoE tier needs to be a bit more clear, that they don't have any intention of it being a full-fledged big AoE impact tier. I'd also really like them to do exactly what they did with the tier 19 set bonus, and maybe look at the one we have now as a way of getting rid of Crashing Storm, which I think is really cumbersome and kind of boring. Maybe make that the way that tree, that's like a burst tool, or that's like a way of making Crash Lightning a bit more interesting instead of like another rotational buff to maintain. But that's like down the line as to whether or not they could actually take the risk on that again. But I like the set bonus now enough that I would like it to be part of the kit. Right.
Yeah, it sounds like we kind of have the same sort of ideas of what really needs to be looked at.
Yeah, shoring up AoE, and we're not talking about this in the broad spec of just like to do the best AoE damage in the game. There's always going to be a hierarchy of what specs and classes do better AoE, but it's been a weird sticking point for enhancement for a long time, and the only time we ever really felt like it was crazy was ridiculously high 12 plus target multi-flame shock spread stupid Fire Nova, which got nerfed, right? Because it was good, instantly nerfed. So
yeah, I have to be like really careful that
yeah,
I don't want them to make our AoE really good, because it was a problem in WoD where like we our single target was hampered by us being able to like go into a boss and suddenly everyone else is completely worthless. We do all the AoE on our own and everyone else can just hit the boss. I don't want that. I want us to be like just like so it's at least relevant, but not like the go-to amazing AoE spec, because I like us being a single target spec with a bit of cleave. I think that it's something that's quite enjoyable, and I don't feel like I'm being intentionally hampered by parts of the kit. And I think that's where we are now is good. There's just a little bit again at the tail end that needs fixing, but they've got us in a good place ish with the damage kit.
So how about bugs or some awkward tomfoolery that needs to be brought up that makes sure that it's known? We know of like the one major one, so I don't know who wants to take that one. But I don't know, is there anything else? I don't think there's anything else that really feels bugged or awkward with the spec. I don't know, Rusah, you put them in your post recently, right? So like, what are the
only big one with bugs, I don't know if that was when you were referencing, is with Ascendance.
Yeah.
It's very small, and it doesn't happen all the time. But if you macro Ascendance...
Huge when it happens, though.
Yeah, when it happens, it is... If you macro Stormstrike or with Ascendance, or you hit Stormstrike as your gloves proc, it fires the cooldown for a full Stormstrike, but it changes it to Windstrike, so it can't be reset by Stormbringer because of whatever internal thing. So you sit out a full Stormstrike cooldown inside Ascendance, which is really unpleasant. It's the worst feeling I think you can get, but it's really, really not common. It's just when it does happen, you really, really notice it.
I've noticed that I think it has a higher occurrence when you have a much higher ping to the server. I think I've run into that particular bug like once or twice so far this entire tier, and that's with having the gloves the whole time. But there was very early on in our Mythic progress, we hit like some really laggy instance servers when we were starting Mythic. We were getting like 300-400 pings, like 2-second input lags, and in that one, I think I got it 3 times in a row. So I think it has something to do with, like Ward was saying, like activating Stormstrike, like the same server frame or frame after that Ascendance procs, and it definitely feels like it's less often than it was on PTR, because there was a time on PTR it happened like every
you could like intentionally trigger it on the PTR.
Yeah, anytime you want it. Yeah, that was bad.
But the only reason that bug's so bad is because it affects your cooldown, and no one wants to like press your cooldown. That's supposed to be the moment where you do load of damage, and it'd be bad. Because I mean, I can like if you look back at say Firelands when we were still using Fire Elemental, it really sucked when you pressed Fire Elemental and it just stood there and did nothing because I don't know, it didn't really want to hit the other big fire guy. It just stood there and got lost, and that's not fun. That kills the really big burst part.
Yeah, he would just stand there and you get to like reapply your Flame Shock or your Storm Strike for him to activate. So you lose, 5-6 seconds or whatever, depending on where you're, whatever. It's very true. It happens. It definitely happens. But I don't think there's anything else crazy. So just that. Because that's the same. It's like if you metamorphosed on Havoc and you hit Chaos Strike, and then you Metamorphosis, and then you go in, and Annihilation's on cooldown. You're just like, what? What's this?
Yeah, it's just. I think we've got a lot less bugs than we had now. I mean, you could probably write a whole page of bugs that Enhancement had.
I probably did.
With Ascendant specifically. But yeah, we're relatively more. I dare say fixed now.
Yeah, I hope so. I think the last little bit of this before we move on all the way is a little nod to the Mage Tower. I did this forever ago. So I did 4 wipes. 5th one got the kill on Sigrid, Halls of Valor, the God Queen's Fury. Made a little like pseudo guide / wipe compendium little video on the channel. But I don't know what you guys did when you did this. Do you remember harkening back to the Mage Tower challenge and how to go for you? What'd you do? Did you dunk it in probably one pull?
Yeah, I did it in one. But I think that one is because of that challenge. I think that challenge is really easy. I don't think that's because Enhancement is particularly strong on it, or I was like playing crazy good. I did it in one on Enhancement. I did it in one on Assassination. I think it took me like 3 as Ret. It was just not. It's not very, because there's no damage check on it. You can just completely focus on not dying, and you can take Rainfall, and you can heal yourself a lot. You can use the legs, and you can just really like abuse it out to just not die. And there's nothing too lethal on it. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it was the most fun challenge because I think I've done about 20 of them now, and some of them are really fun. Like I really enjoyed doing them. Ours was sort of like, oh well, that wasn't that great.
That was okay. Yeah, what'd you think, Rusah?
Yeah, I took like 2 or 3 pulls. The biggest thing that caught me up was the Valkyries that come from that right hallway, I guess the eastern hallway. For whatever reason, the angle that they charge at is so deceptive. I don't know if that's still a thing, but I remember sitting there like standing like in between the lines saying, oh, there's no way I'm getting hit. And then I get nailed like a full Valkyrie over. So that took a slight adjustment. But I agree, like overall, it was relatively easy. We had good tools to deal with it. I just kept her hexed for like 80% of the time and then just killed the ads. It was easy. The Eye of Eternity one I thought was really fun, especially since, I agree with Word that, a lot of the other ones were a lot more fun. I like the Eye of Eternity one because most classes that complete it have a significantly different strategy for doing so. And the Sigrun one, everyone does it the same way. You CC Sigrun, you blow up the ads. There's no flexibility. Like you just kill it. That's it. And the other ones were cool because they were kind of tailored around each class's mechanics, and you could do interesting things.
Survival hunters would argue.
That one, I did Eye of Eternity as survival first.
Oh.
And they had every utility there was nothing prohibiting a survival hunter from killing it.
The survival
they could deal
one,
with everything.
You had them, they were just not obvious.
Yeah,
they weren't as obvious as to how you did it, but you could easily do it. I've done the survival one since. It's a bit easier now, but
that one was challenging. I think I did it like item level like 895, 897, something like that. Wow. It was a long fight, but it was challenging. It was fun. It was cool.
I think the one thing I keep bringing up on the show, and we give the little nod to the Mage Tower, is that it's a really neat addition to the game, kind of like the Chromie scenario, right? Those kind of things. But I wish it would have a little more. Like, you could, like, why can't we just go as Enhancement and try the other challenges as Enhancement? Just for fun. We can't queue up for any of the DPS challenges in any other spec, and once you do it once, it's gone forever. Which is really kind of a lackluster thing, to put all that time into those scenarios, and then you just do it once on that one spec, and that's it. So I kind of wish they would open that up a little bit more, just to go do them for fun. No achievements, no nothing, just for doing it. That'd be neat. Because I would love to see if we could do the other DPS challenges as Enhancement. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that's true. They did that for the Proving Grounds. You could go in and you even got achievements for doing them as like the tank one as a DPS or the healing one as a, vice versa. So I think that's something I think Blizzard could bring back and let us repeat.
Yep, that would be. But anything else from the first section before we move us on? We've got some nitty-gritty stuff on the horizon here, so I want to get to those. Good?
Yeah, that's pretty much everything for for the first section.
Sounds good to me.
Good.
All right. Well, I'm going to move us along here and plug a few things that you may or may not have heard about, and to do some little side announcement bits just to make sure you're all on the same page, depending on when you tune into the show. If you've missed part of the opening, we only have one more major show coming up soon. We have the Brewmaster Monk show. They're kind of end capping all the tanking shenanigans, and of course, one of the strongest tanks, you know, back and forth between them and Guardian. So that's next week. Details on the guests coming up on that one. Then there'll be a bit of a break from the show for a while. There'll still be live streams and other things coming out on YouTube and whatnot. That's totally going to happen. But taking a small break from the live show to work on a whole bunch of things in the back end, website stuff. I have a manager now working on a whole bunch of different ways to build the show and how they should be going. All the shows in the future, though, will be individual specs. So all the pure DPS specs, I've been asking for this for a long time. Where can I get my Assassination Rogue show, or my Marksman Hunter Rogue, Marksman Hunter show, my Frost Mage show, all individual. So those will happening right after BlizzCon. There'll be a pre-BlizzCon special and a post-BlizzCon special, as is tradition. So it'll probably be Preach and Novel for post, not confirmed yet. Then we'll have some 2 or 3 guests on for the pre-one. But that is going to be happening. So stick around for those, of course. You can hit up Twitter or, of course, YouTube if you've missed any of the past shows. And a big shout out, of course, everyone supporting the show directly on Patreon. And, of course, Truffles, Ludovicus, Tazlin, R4, Dalthier, Quen, Vrez, and a little side nod to Poke, all the assistant producers on the show. If you want more podcasts, those exist. We make BTS podcasts. These are sort of the meet and greets that we do, unscripted, rambling, rant, bant nonsense. There are 23 of them so far. And if you never checked out any of the BTS podcasts before, just because of whatever reason, these are all now about half and half. So the first 12 are now for just patrons only. So you can just toss the show $1 if you'd like. And you can get access to the first 12 BTS podcasts. They go all the way back to, where do they go back to? The Hunter show? Yeah, there we go. And then as time rolls forward, I will be downgrading, I guess, or deflagging at the $5 tier and putting more of them at the $1 or whatever tier. So you can check those out more. But of course, if you want all of them as they come out, then that is listed there too. There's the show notes that go up there, upcoming art and work and stuff like that that's on there. There's a whole bunch. You can always check this out in the tags on the side. But that is something that you guys can look at and listen to. And additionally, of course, all the shows are on YouTube. And if you want to listen to the MP3 only versions, you can check out iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music. Just search for FinalBossTV. You hook that into your audio device, your Kindle, your iPad, your phone, whatever. And the RSS feed is available too. It's a weird string of code stuff, and that's one of the things in the future we'll be working on better, is sort of making that a little more accessible. But if you want to listen to the audio-only versions, those are available as well. And outside of that, if you want to support the show in a more physical manner, this is going to be going through a whole lot of updates very soon. A whole bunch of new designs are on the horizon. We just launched our nod to Methods World First Kill Jaden. These new designs are just cool designs. They're a little bit of tie, a little bit of nod to them. They don't have like the chibis anymore like we used to have. This is an old design. This is getting phased out. The old school Final Boss TV medallion, this is being removed very soon. We have a whole bunch of new ones coming. So if you want a piece of history, this is the original design. This one is leaving very shortly. All of the Fabelina little Final Bosses, of course, staying. Those aren't going anywhere, but a whole bunch of new things on the horizon. I think Tutron and I have somewhere in the ballpark of like half a dozen or more new designs on the way. So if you want to grab a little bit of merch, support the show, keep it going, that is also one way you can do it as well. But that is enough out of me. Let's unmute and let's dive into, oh man. So we're gonna walk through a little bit of the tiers, legendaries, talents, and some soapbox. Hopefully you've worked on your soapbox from last night, Rusah. You have the
maybe we'll see. We'll see.
Okay.
You bought a new one.
Oh, you better. That's fair. Oh, we'll go with that. Yeah, that was a funny moment in the moment in the BTS podcast, where we're just like, all right, do some end cap closing for me. Rusah was like, what? But
well, you should have let Word go first. See, remember, I'm the first. Yeah. See, I could have faked it if I knew what was going on.
True.
Yeah. So let's do a
truly unscripted.
We have some glancy stuff here because obviously this kind of stuff can be read either on Icy Veins or the Wowhead Guide, both curated by Wordup. but priority on secondary stats has changed somewhat, and there's some back and forth about like what to aim for, and people are like, how much of this do I need, or feel good points, or this is new findings. And Wordup and I talked about this in the 725 video, but to drive it in again, Wordup, what's the hierarchy of stats, and also why?
It's changed a little bit since really early on, because now it's pretty firmly haste is usually the top, and then it's mastery, then create and verse. They like those two sort of like flip flop at the bottom as well. But there's not really like, it's not like they're terrible. Haste is just, it's got better and better with the more effects that are getting affected by haste as we've moved on in the expansion. Alongside it just always being a pretty good stat for us, mastery being a little bit less required now that there's a lot more sources of getting Stormbringer, which haste in turn helps a lot more with than it did. There's some breakpointy stuff that Rusah can talk about.
Yep.
I think a lot of people have got really, really honed in on these being like absolutely mandatory, which is what always happens when someone uses the word breakpoint. But they're kind of just like peaks in the stat distribution that make it look really good, and then after that, it's not the end of the world if you can't get them.
Yeah, Rusah, talk about the mathy stuff that we figured out.
Yeah, so Riot likes to refer to he's coined the phrase reverse cliffs, and I actually really like that.
Okay.
So basically what happens is there's a certain point, there's a couple points where we get extra GCDs, extra ability activations inside of some of our temporary buffs. A good example is Unleash Doom. At 25% haste, plus a small amount depending on your server latency, because that makes a big difference. Usually around 26%, you are able to get another ability activated inside of that Unleash Doom window. And so there's a slight bump in haste value as you approach that, because the DPS, like if you're looking at like Simcraft and you look at stat weights or a scaling plot, you'll see it goes up and then there's like a nice bump and then it keeps going up. The reason for that is once you hit that point, you get that free like 10, 15, whatever your sim value boost is, but haste still maintains its previous value before that point. It's just free DPS. So a lot of people, read this and think breakpoint, oh, it drops off, I need to go for other stats after that. It's not the case. What made haste good before that point is still good afterwards. It just speeds up our rotation, especially with the Stormbringer design, like Word was saying. It's just, haste is just even more opportunities to proc your Stormbringer. So there's 25% for Unleash Doom. There's another Ascendance point inside of that. 35%, so right around 36%. Again, remember, add anywhere from half to a full percent, depending on your server latency, is where you get another really nice point with the Ascendance Gloves. The big one that everyone's chasing right now is 50%. Everything lines up at 50%. You get like from 0 to 50, you get 2 extra abilities inside of Unleash Doom. You get 2 extra abilities inside of Doom Winds. You get 2 extra guaranteed win strikes inside of your regular Ascendance. Actually, I think it's 3 for the full 15-second Ascendance. The Ascendance procs is another 2. So it's just 50% is that point where everything lines up, and it's just incredibly valuable. So a lot of people are chasing that, but that's not to say that 50% is like the make or break. Like I'm running like 39% right now because I sacrificed too much to hit that point. And mastery is still a good stat up until that. So what we've just been telling everyone is if you have the gear and you can happen to hit that point, great, go for it. But if you didn't, you don't have to sacrifice everything to get there. It's something that we're just going to run into eventually.
Right.
So yeah, that's the important bit. There's a few people who've seen it and they've took it as like I'm gonna use all of these, like these crazy items, these items that are not very good that I've picked up from Mythic Plus, but it has haste on. I'm going to use my Cradle of Anguish in progress from Tomb, which despite the fact that half the time it's dropping off because I'm getting hit by Hydra shots, it gets me to 50%, and I really need that. Which is it's not going to fix your damage getting to 50%. You're still going to do really good damage without it if you have gear on that's good anyway. It's not like you apply that and suddenly you do 10% more. It's like a bump. It's like an extra 1 to 2%. Maybe like at a push in certain fights, you get like you might eke out 5% at the right time, but it's not something that is going to make or break you, especially if you have to use weird gear to do it. Especially as well when you're sacrificing a lot of mastery. Mastery is really good in AoE at the moment, and there's a lot of AoE and there's a lot of cleaving in Tomb. And if you start dumping 20-30% mastery to get to that haste, you're hitting yourself pretty hard in other places that you might not be happy with later on.
Yep.
The key thing to remember, though, is that what makes haste good before and after those points is unaffected by hitting them. It's just free damage, and that's what I think people are unused to. It's totally irrelevant as to why haste is a good stat for us.
Just good. Just get it. I know earlier in the expansion, all I said was people was just stack mastery and haste. Now it's just stack haste and a big
reason for that, you know, at the beginning of the expansion, spontaneous appendages was essentially acting as a mastery multiplier for us.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's really the big reason why everyone was dumping haste and just going hard on mastery. And, you know, they kind of fixed that, and things have leveled off and become a little more natural through the expansion.
Right.
Crit and Verse get the shoutouts as just flat damage mods. They don't really interact with our kit anyway.
No,
but they aren't dreadful to the point where if it's got that on it, you can't use it. It's not like we've got the same situation as haste with rogues, where if it's got haste on, then like the item might as well not exist.
Or haste for feral druids.
Yeah, but it's
Mastery
still like,
for survival hunters.
I've got some crit, I've got some verse. It could be better, but it could also be worse. So I'll just use it anyway. So they aren't like miserable stats to have on. That's what people need to also appreciate. I think people overthink the stat thing with us far too often. A lot of the time, the gear just is what you have, and you can use it. And item level tends to win out for us unless it's really specific combinations, and it's really that simple.
So moving on to tiers now, I want to give like a passing nod to tier 19. Let's squelch this right now real quick. Keeping a strong two-piece tier 19 for single target is beneficial, but like I'm wearing it right now. People ask on stream all the time, why are you not wearing tier 20? So I don't have the chest yet. We're 7 weeks in. Maiden's dropped like 3 prot chests. I just don't have it. I've coined every single week, nothing. So I can't wear tier 20. So I'm still wearing two-piece, but that is only a beneficial thing if there's like an eye level breakpoint on that. Like mine's just 905, 910, which is like meh. But if you have like 920s, if you get lucky enough and you keep doing 9-hold mythic and you get good, then I guess you can hold them. But overall, there's no tier 19, tier 20 shenanigans, right? Word? Like there's no holding on to that.
It's just it's a single target oriented bonus. It has a little bit of gain in AoE because you're getting a little bit more Stormbringers in mass AoE, but it's just a pure single target thing. And a lot of the time, you're going to have a lot worse items for your tier 19.
Yep.
And especially, again, I always try and talk about it in the current tier. In Tomb, there is an overwhelming amount of cleave. There's only 2 bosses that are entirely single target in the whole place. And if that's the case, the 2-piece loses out more and more to the new 4-piece. Because the new 4-piece is a cleave and AoE bonus. That's where its main gain is. So that's sort of, to me, I don't use the old tier bonuses because I don't have particularly high level ones. But I wouldn't go out of my way to use it either, even on those bosses, because of that item level gap. But that could be the smallest optimization if you really cared about it.
Okay. I know it comes up now and then, and I have to ask on every single show, because Blizzard does this 6-piece bonuses, and it's just kind of nonsensical. Everyone's always like, oh, should I be wearing this and this? But no.
There is the one nod that you could make. Akainu and Eye of Twisting Nether builds are not significantly behind Smoldering Heart for single target. For most people, it's probably going to be like around a 1% difference. And there are some people that have actually posted like that they have better Akainu setups than Smoldering Heart. And a lot of that just boils down to gear and stats and what you have available to you. But if you're running Akainu, it does give you the opportunity to run 4-piece, 2-piece for free, essentially. Well, I mean, free. You're always making an opportunity cost somewhere. But it does give you the ability with no competing tier slots. Alternatively, you could also run you know, 4-piece and a dungeon set. If you wanted to be silly, you could go 2-piece, 2-piece, 2-piece with a dungeon set as well. So that is one thing that's worth mentioning, is that the Akainu setup really does give a lot more flexibility and crossing tier bonuses.
The one thing to touch on that, though, is that this is more like a personal thing, but Sims aren't everything when it comes to judging these legendaries. The gloves have a whole lot of hidden value in them. That whilst they look like, you'll get your sim output and it'll say you do 1.3 million, and sure, on average, like that's how much you do if you hit a dummy for that much time. But then you're doing Goroth and they proc when you're running out, and suddenly you've just gained millions of damage from that one proc that I kind of had no chance of giving you because you're hitting from out of range. And that's like a little thing that you can always put in the back of your pocket with Smoldering Heart, and that's why I think those are like, not equipping them in Tomb is a bad choice.
For sure, I totally agree. I've put on Smoldering Heart since the day I got them. I haven't taken them off since.
Same.
It's just worth noting that if balance changes with legendaries, if Smoldering Heart gets nerfed, if something that makes a Akainu strong gets buffed, then it is worth mentioning the tier flexibility. Another unstated thing with Smoldering Heart that I think a lot of people don't immediately understand is the incredible cleave value, the sheer amount of storm strikes or wind strikes that you're able to pump out, that procs crash lightning, the cleave buff. They're really strong in just about every situation, whereas the Akainu is really just strong in single target. So that's kind of another hidden value of it.
Okay. So hello to tier 20, which will all be, at least hopefully all of you will have before I do. Another reset on Tuesday. Here's hoping. But so the Regalia of the Skybreaker, basically a up-resed, very fancy tier from Black Temple and into Hyjal from back in the day, even though it's all fixed. The belt and boots aren't wrong. Or what's that? Gold? What is that? So our two-piece now is that Crash Lightning will give us 5% crit for 16 seconds, which is just kind of like a numbers crank. It's okay, I guess. And then the 4-piece is that Storm Strike increases the initial damage of your next Crash Lightning by 35% per stack, up to 15 stacks. So that's 525% more damage on the Crash Lightning AoE frontal hit. So where the math on this one, and chat's talking about, you know, single target fights and Gora, Sisters, Maiden, Avatar, and Word's talking about it in chat too. But how often, because you guys both have this, I don't, how often does the functionality actually work that you actually stack up to that many? Are you actually doing that? Or is this kind of a rotational thing where you hit it every 10 or so seconds though?
It depends on the fight a lot of the time, or your RNG. When you get a glove proc, that can, in some cases, that can rack you up to 15 before you even refresh for the 2-piece buff. But a lot of the time there is some gameplay around it where you've stacked it up and say Hajatan as a simple example, like you've got ads coming in 10 seconds and the buffers just fell off. But if you hold it when all those ads stack and then you crash, you're going to crash for like 3 million on all of those ads. That's more value than 10 seconds of the 5% crit buff. So it's worth saving. And that's why I really like this bonus, is that it lets us do something that we otherwise could not do, which is burst AoE. And it's the only way that we can get it. And that's why this set bonus ended up being so much better than it was predicted, especially when they got rid of some of the real quirks in the original proc design. But you'll get pretty frequent use out of the increase, I'd say, on most fights with Cleave.
Okay.
Most importantly, I'd say it's just a fun bonus to use. You know, all expansion we've been lacking, like Word was saying, that burst DPS, and being able to, you know, play around, stacking it up, and then hitting it and watch your damage just fly up because you got that huge crit on like 15 targets. First boss and Maw is a great example. When all those ads spawn, DK grip, Crash Lightning, it's just fun to use. It's really satisfying.
Yeah, it's a good bonus, and as Wordup mentioned earlier in the show, it shores up this never-ending, I guess, nonsensical pitfall. I mean, not every spec can be or should be good at all of the different pillars of DPS in the game. Arguably, that's not the case. Look at Unholy DKs right now. I mean, really. So there is a thing that I wonder if we're ever going to see that rolled into baseline, because it is a mechanical and throughput, like, little mini game to play. And Enhancement's very much about mini games, you know, reacting to procs and keeping up certain uptimes, and it's just how the spec is playing all of Legion. So hopefully I'll get it and to be able to play it and see how fun it is, because I don't know right now. I made a weak aura that I added on to Word Up's weak auras to track the 5% crit buff, but that's, you know, a marginal, very small. Basically, it works out to like 5% damage, not a really big deal. So,
yeah, that bonus is just. I think it's just good. I don't think we've had one that's that interesting to play with in a while.
mm-hmm.
Some fights, if you can actually have a real fundamental change in how you approach them, and I think that means that it's a real hit on the set bonus side, and the kind of thing that's like complex enough that it will be worthy as a talent or a class mechanic.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how our AoE, you know, Crash Lightning is a great ability, interacts with our kit well. There's just that, you know, one thing missing to make it like that you could play around and make it powerful. And T20 does a great job. The 4-piece does a great job of fulfilling that. And it's just, we definitely need something when it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when it's gone, a few months from now or whatever, you know, looking at tier 21 now, and this is just a little bit of future sight, looking at the 7.3 PTR. This is not fine-tuned yet. I think the set bonus has changed like 2 or 3 times as it is right now, so it could change again as we currently look at it. However, though, looking at the garb of venerated spirits, our 2-piece is that casting Storm Strike has a 15% chance to increase the damage of our next Rockbiter by 100%. Essentially, hot hand for Rockbiter. And our 4-piece is that Rockbiter, by itself, will cause the target to take 10% increased damage from Fire, Frost, and Nature from us. Single target for the next 4.5 seconds. And the big thing I'm going to throw this over to Word Up right off the bat is that it's a single target debuff that has no other effects. Why isn't it buffing us? Word Up, go.
It's like this is the exact same problem that comes up all the time. Like, it's why does this one have to be a debuff? It's this is one of the most half-baked sets of set bonuses I've seen us have personally. Like, there are parts of it, especially the old 2-piece, which was the 4-piece, was irredeemably bad in its original form.
It was complete. It was mechanically, fundamentally, it was dead on arrival.
And this one now, I was genuinely sure that it was a buff until I went on the PTR and they let us use it. When I realized it was a debuff, I cannot see any reason for it to be that, especially when we're going from the tier 20 bonus, which is an AoE centric set, to then come to the new raid, and have all AoE interest rinsed. There's no AoE impact of either bonus whatsoever, even slightly. There was a very slight bonus from the old 4-piece, but it was still terrible anyway. I don't get it. I don't get why that couldn't be a buff and at least affect Crash Lightning. So yeah, I can't really say much good about it. This set bonus is not. It's not for me. Maybe other people like the idea of it. And like another proc is great, but it's clustering the rotation a lot when it's already very cluttered.
It reads as it is now. It's basically a very short form Flame Tongue. Do we know if it does it pandemic? If you do 2 Rockbiters back to back, does it add time?
It wasn't on the PTR.
Oh gosh, that sounds so bad, because it doesn't necessarily need to force, but it mathematically forces a play style where you need to hit a Rockbiter every 4 seconds. Every 2 globals ish, it's a Rockbiter, which
it's really not
work.
Too bad. It's actually, it looks worse on paper than it actually is. The bonus is implemented in PTR mode on Simcraft right now. I think we're looking at, without making a single change to the APL that Simcraft uses, we're looking at like 75 to 85% uptime on it just naturally. So I don't think there's, and we've been playing around with some slight priority changes, trying to see if there are any rotational changes that need to be made. And we're making small progress. Big shout out to Genji on the Earthshrine Discord. He's been doing some good work on that lately. It's just right now we're not seeing any real interactive gameplay around it. You just put it on, it's passive, you forget about it. The biggest thing is it's just for the final tier bonus of the expansion, it just looks boring. It doesn't look fun. It looks, you know, it just doesn't fit anything other than, hey, let's make a rock biter set.
Yep. Like the 2-piece isn't terrible. That's just a proc we react to. It's the same thing we've been doing this whole expansion with, reacting to either Hot Hand or how Stormbringer
As of right
works.
now, like the design of it's not terrible. As of right now, we're seeing that it needs to be buffed by like buffed from 100 to like 200 to 300% to be viable in current numbers. So, but that's just tuning. We're totally fine with discussing tuning. I'm confident Blizzard will get it in a good place. Design wise, it looks fine. But just to be clear, at 100%, it's definitely not strong enough.
Not strong enough. It's so numerically aside. This will, if Purge ever listens to this or he's lurking in there somewhere, this will give him a little bit of a grin. The 4-piece, because it's rotated around Rockbiter. Why doesn't that work like the old Fist of Stone from beta?
He hates that talent.
but Fist of Stone in this sense as a actual set bonus, just casting Rockbiter causes the shaman to deal 10% increased fire, frost, nature damage for the next 4.5, 5 seconds, whatever the number needs to be. So that means that it's a personal buff. It empowers the shaman. It is just like another hailstorm, another landslide, another flame tongue, but we're used to that. So I guess if they're going to drive that in as like an amplifying modifier because it's set bonus, it should be that, because the debuff mechanic is just, we're not debuffers.
So that's definitely what we're focusing on right now.
Yeah.
Is the 4-piece can be redeemed if it's just a buff on us instead of debuff on the target. And that's really what we're focusing on at the moment.
Okay, because there's a lot of awkwardness of this, because it's also like a mini Earth and Spike. So then the question that always comes up, like, well, then is Earth and Spike going to be better? What about Boulder Fist as a talent then? Then, like, do you go back to like an Akainu build because you would put a Hot Hand with it? So then you're buffing your crazy Lava Lashes and your Boulder Fists and the Boulder Fist talent on top of it. Like all this, maybe there's just numbers there, but those questions always start coming up when you see a mini buff like this.
And I'm looking forward to figuring out answers to those questions. I think that it's not really worth looking into those at the moment until what the tier bonus is and how it works settles. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely excited to look into what kind of new combinations and potential is out there.
Yeah, they're the kind of like minutia that you do at the end when you know that it's locked in. I will say though, the one thing that really it disappoints me a bit about these bonuses is when you looked at the Tomb ones, to us they looked really crazy when they came out. Like the 4-piece, it looked really weird. The original one was a little bit difficult to trigger, would be the words. But like when you looked at the bonus, it seemed like it was a bit wacky that we were giving us like a really heavy AoE set. But then when you actually do the raid, it was really obvious it suited the design of the raid. Like the way that Tomb works, it's a really good bonus for Tomb. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't have been a great bonus for Nighthold or Emerald Nightmare, but it is a good bonus for Tomb. But this set is just too generically single target oriented for me to think I can really see what kind of encounters look like they're totally going to make use of those bonuses. And again, the 4-piece not being a buff is like a major downside to me. But we'll see. Maybe they can like redeem it with testing, which I'd hope so.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And the PTR are still just chugging away right now. We're getting new builds every week to 2 weeks right now. And we'll see. The 77-day rumor stuff is, being put out there that we're going to get the patch so much earlier than we think, like end of the month kind of deal. But there's a lot of fudderduck. And the tier sets can keep being worked on the whole time because we're not going to get the raid until after BlizzCon, most likely. So it's not a huge deal to worry about. So we'll wait and see. The tier 21's come a long way. Its first iteration a few weeks ago was laughable. So it's better now. But that all wrapped together, all this goop. I don't know which one of you wants to tackle sort of the hierarchies of build, legendaries, talents, and how all this sort of comes together, and what have the community sort of grasp onto for enhancement? Like what What are we wearing? What are we speccing? That kind of stuff. Do you want to do?
We briefly touched on this in the before the BTS podcast last night. You know, everyone that's listening can take with a grain of salt that there are multiple setups that are viable, and within those, most of them are within 1 to 2% of each other. They're all viable. You know, like a 5 to 10k DPS difference in Emerald Nightmare is gigantic. A 5 to 10k DPS now is almost inconsequential. So, you know, anything that we bring up, anything that we talk about, like you can pretty much just play whatever is fun to you. You can play what looks the most appealing. We're in a good spot right now where we have a lot of viable choices. So I think that's worth bringing up and talking about, is that a lot of stuff is good.
Right. Yeah. The thing with the legendaries that I always feel like this was in the podcast, but one thing I always really feel like is a lot of people latch onto what is the best legendary. Like, if I don't have this legendary, then I've had terrible RNG and I'll never do good damage.
Yeah.
And they think that the only reason that people run legendaries who rank really well or are using them in raids or whatever is because they're fundamentally the best. I could tell you now, if the gloves weren't the best, they were like half as good as they are, I'd still probably use them a lot of the time because they're just really fun. There's like they have a wild card factor to them that they can just like pop off and do something really good on a fight. They're just a fun legendary, and sometimes like losing a little bit of damage for that is totally worth it. Like, it just takes a little bit of experimenting with legendaries to feel out where they are. When you go into a fight, you should probably like play around with 5 or 6 different ones and see which ones land well for you. Because say when I did Mistress, I obviously went in and thought, well, the chest is obviously going to be great. We're going to get it up a lot of the time. Or maybe the ring, because I can't get it up as consistently. And then I thought, well, maybe Cephas, I can get some interrupts. And I sat on that. Then Cephas was really good. It was really fun. And it added an extra like mechanic to the fight. Added some movement speed for the high movement areas. But that's not something I would have ever come to if I just took what is the logical best in a situation and just put that on and never tried.
I think the only shout outs to legendaries that have to going over all of them is most likely just the boots and the belt. Just don't wear those. And then and then you're fine.
Yeah. You can make use of most of the other ones.
You can definitely group all the legendaries into you know, basically 3 categories, like totally worthless, situational, and good most of the time. And really the boots and the belt are the only ones that sit solidly in that just don't use them category. Things like you know, most people dread getting the KJ trinket. It's pretty good in AoE burst. You know, it's useful in Mythic Plus. It's, if you have one, you can utilize it. You can play around it. It's not, you know, it's not the end of the world if it's like the only one you have.
Yeah, I've used it on some bosses in progress, and I've also used it on some bosses just in farm, and ended up doing a lot of damage with it, just because it's got so much stats on it, and it is an extra tool, and it's not something that we can do. It's burst AoE. I mean, it's not spectacular, but it's free. So you need to just let go of the constant, is it the hardline best, and instead look at how can I make it really good when I'm playing.
Yeah, as I said earlier in the show too, Wordup actually came by when I was working on Desolate Host a few weeks ago, Mythic, and I think it was a repeat kill at that point. But he made fun of me because I wasn't running Sephuz, and I was like, yeah, I mean, but and I didn't realize at the time that you were basically nudging me like master to student to learn it on this fight, because it's easier, because it's way more beneficial on Mistress for pumping so much single target damage into that stupid Naga. So that was a huge thing to learn. And little things like that could be using Magnum Opus on Sisters of the Moon progression. That is a great Magnum Opus fight because of the raw dumb damage of that encounter. So like, don't be being so pigeonholed. And I get asked on stream, you know, like, do you just run gloves and Twisting Nether all the time? And mostly, but as Wordup said, gloves are fun and ring is consistent, but I could swap out to other things and not see a huge difference, or play to the strength of others and live with Magnum Opus, or game the haste windows on Sifus on certain fights with interrupts. So just keep that in mind.
The thing is, a lot of our legendaries, there's very few hard, strong rules for, you use this for this situation, this for that one, that for this one. Cephas is a great example. There are fights where it can be strong, like Desolate Host or Mistress, but even with its on-paper strengths, you still have to consider what your raid is doing, how the fight's going. I tried Cephas for a little bit on Mistress, and it's just depending on how your raid handles ads and handles stuns and such. A lot of it just depends on how your raid interacts and how your raid executes fights. So even when we say Cephas is good on Mistress, it still depends. In the biggest thing, and this is kind of what Word was saying in the podcast last night, is you just have to try it. Sit down, put it on, do some pulls, see how it feels, see if you can get better at it, practice with it. And at the end of the day, you just have to try it. We get a lot of questions, here's my 5 legendaries, what should I use? Which have you tried? What feels good?
Right. Word Up, you want to walk me through sort of the El Clasico build right now, talent-wise? And then I'll sort of bring up some devil's advocate-y things, if you'd like.
Talent-wise, I say pretty consistently you take Landslide, unless you're using Akainus, at which point you take Hot Hand. Landslide's just easy talent, hard to mess up. It's just there. Consistent, free AP, or agility. It's just a easy talent. Your mid tier, your movement tier, you can either go lunge or windrush, depending. If the raid needs movement, then you can take windrush. If you need movement more frequently, then you take lunge. Rainfall, I guess if you're doing the Mage Tower challenge or something, but not really.
Get that movement talent rainfall.
The CC tier, so wash, you pick whatever you want, man. I take Lightning Surge all the time. Maybe I take Earth Grab to proc Cephos on certain situations because it lines up with the cooldown, but otherwise, not that important. For 60, it's pretty much always Ancestral Swiftness, dead on, unless, again, you're taking Akainus, which point you take Hailstorm.
There is the only exception to that rule. It kind of boils back down to that whole wonky haste stat points. There is a point where if you can use Hailstorm with either Twisting Nether without dropping below one of those 25, 35, whatever haste breakpoints, then Ancestral Swiftness and Hailstorm have very comparative value. Right now, if you look at the Mythic Tier 20 profile in Simcraft, it actually runs Hailstorm over Ancestral Swiftness because it gets to that kind of perfect haste point. So even though Ancestral Swiftness, and what Word was saying earlier, you can't mess up Ancestral Swiftness. It's still something to consider, something to think about. There are points where there is choice still.
Yeah. Then for your tier 75, they all work. They're all okay. Generally, you play Tempest because Tempest adds something to our rotational burst, but so does Overcharge. Overcharge, however, is a much more intensive, should I say, talent. I know that you don't like it, Bay, and I know there's a lot of other players who don't like it, but it is good, especially with the Farseering. And Empowered Stormlash as a completely passive talent is all right. So they're all usable, but I'd take Tempest. When it comes to the AoE tier, again, these are all usable. Crashing Storm is the easy one where you don't have to do anything extra. It's just free. But you can lose a lot of damage if there's high movement, which really, really kills it on things like Mistress. Fury of Air is more intensive again. You need to be more aware of your Maelstrom. But they play well with the gloves. Another way of triggering them and just doing free AoE off the global. And Sundering is, as much as I'd really like to say it's really awesome, it's really starting to fall off just with raw scaling problems on it now. It's just not keeping up. It's not doing enough damage. The burst AoE isn't very relevant. It's worth like a third of a full stacked Crash Lightning with the 4-piece now. So I struggle to say pick that unless it's Mythic Plus. You need a bit more CC. And on the tier 100, don't take Boulder Fist. That's all I can say.
Just pretend it doesn't exist.
Other than Spike and Ascendance, 100% flex. It's which one you like the most. Sometimes one will win, sometimes the other will win. Depends what the fight requires, how you can play them, and so on. That's the healthiest way of really describing those two.
Yeah, because there's a back and forth that comes up that I get asked all the time. Like, so Earth and Spike sims higher for me. Should I play it? Well, and then the question comes in. So Earth and Spike sims higher because of what? Do you have the gloves? Oh, well, yes. Well, okay. If you Earth and Spike into the damage amp window and you get glove procs, it's going to be huge. It's, 65% more damage, technically. Armor ignore plus the 30% physical from Earth and Spike. So it's a huge damage window. But how often is that going to line up in your favor? And you could have a great pull and then wipe. So then there goes all your RNG. So there's a back and forth. Obviously, Earth and Spike, as Wordup always says, Earth and Spike is an ability. It's harder to use. You can mess it up. Whereas Ascendance, you just hit it and hit Wind Strike, basically, right? So,
there is one potential to mess up Ascendance.
If you get
glove procs will stack with Ascendance and not the other way around. If you proc Ascendance from the gloves and you activate Ascendance, you lose any of the remaining duration on that proc, and it just sets it to 15 seconds. If you get Ascendance glove procs during like the hard cast 3-minute cooldown, 15 seconds, it will add to the current duration. So that's really the only thing you have to watch out for.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a one-way street with those two.
It's just the way they're built in, which is fine. I've had and many of you may have the same feeling that I've had before, where you'll right-click a boss in a Mythic Plus to get ready to go into combat, so your auto attacks go into go, but you get Fury of Air rolling and you ascend and you auto attack from a distance and pull a boss early. Happens to me all the time. Always happens, of course. Very, very small chance to proc the gloves on a Fury of Air tick, but always happens when you don't want it to.
Well, there's more than a few times when I've been ready. I know I'm going to press Ascendant, so I press my button and I press it, and it's already procced, and I immediately. Yep. I mean the Mistress kill that I had. That was in the logs. I did a lot of damage, but I knew immediately as soon as I looked at it that I completely overwrote one of my Ascendance procs, because I just knew in my head I was going to press it right then to stay out of range with the fish, and wasted 10 seconds of it. And it's the kind of thing where you press it and you immediately recoil because you've just basically burned your cooldown.
Procs in the opener throw me off real bad too, because there's really just the one ability, well, two abilities that can activate it before your first Ascendance and your first Wind Strike. It's the Crash Lightning to get the 2-piece buff up and Fury of Air rolling. So that the odds of getting a proc in your opener are very, very low. But then when it happens, I just reflexively hit Ascendance anyways, and I'm just like, oh, that was stupid.
Yep, it definitely happens. You get the buffer fish on Mistress, and you walk out to get it, and you walk back in. You're like, all right, here we go. And then you crack into Ascendance from the gloves as you hit it. It feels bad, but it's gonna happen. I mean, you could avoid that by not running Fury of Air, of course. Then have a constant spending going on.
It could still happen on the crash.
It could happen on the crash before you go.
It's just a thing where I've repeated that same opener thousands of times this patch alone. And then just the one thing that happens, the GCD before, and you're just like, it just
messes with you. You're locked in, because a lot of times you're playing 2 or 3 globals ahead in your head. So if something gets in the way of that, if you don't react in time because you're looking at the fight or something, then you can lose out.
Yep, it's a really minor problem to have. It's just one of those, it's just a little more mini games for enhancement we got to deal with, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yep. But I guess moving on from those, we wanted to make sure we did it earlier, but we want to make sure we bring it up again that Windrush Totem is very good. Get into the habit of either having 1 macro or 2 macros for it. 1 cast at cursor, super nice addition to the game recently, or cast itself, so you can just plop it in a melee and there you go. Get into those tornadoes on Mistress when you plop it down and you're all going through the same corridor, because it only has a 10-yard radius is really helpful. If we're going to have the argument that we came back up with that, enhancements raid utility is very low, then abuse the crap out of Windrush Totem. Make sure your raid knows that's a good thing that we have out of the one thing we bring. So yeah, use that. That's a good one. Never take Boulder Fist, never take Lightning Shield unless you're PvPing, maybe, but not really, or you're leveling. That's the one thing I wanted to cap off there. That stupid Lightning Shield talent should be a PvP talent. It's dumb. Anyway. Or it could have the glyph built-in baseline.
Ooh.
Wouldn't that be nice? Damn, that'd be nice. Oh, well. Trinkets.
Can only dream.
Yeah. This is a side note, sort of like honorable mentions of trinkets, because I did a big trinket sim on stream recently, and I looked at like 12 different trinkets, varying eye levels from like 880 all the way up to the 930. And the difference in damage is so tiny that it doesn't even matter. But Wordup wants to make sure that I talk about BTI, so Wordup, go for it.
I'd really rather not talk about BTI, but it still exists, and I think it's really stupid that we're back in like a Dragon Spine trophy from Gruul kind of situation, where a trinket from the very first raid tier is still relevant now and will remain relevant for the rest of the expansion. It's just the chance of you getting one that's actually the right item level is virtually zero, but it is really, really good. So a lot of people are still going and farming it. It's just that it is a super consistent trinket in a world of horribly inconsistent trinkets or awkwardly designed trinkets. And BTI is just like a classic main stat with a secondary proc, but it procs really frequently and it gets better during the later parts of the fight, marginally anyway. It's just really good, and it's a shame that they've gone a bit too out there with other trinkets recently that keeps that trinket relevant.
A lot of it is it sits in that same category as the Arcana Crystal. It's just over budgeted for its item level. If you compare the amount of stats with the uptime that BTI gives compared to other typical stat proc trinkets, it's significantly more powerful than other trinkets of its item level. And Arcana Crystal sits in the same place where secondary stats are so strong, and it just gives so many. And Blizzard said before that they don't want to nerf these trinkets that people have been farming for and spending a lot of time getting, and that's admirable, but they probably should have nipped it in the bud like way back in like first or second week of Emerald Nightmare. It's maddening that it's still so good, and it's more just a testament of just how just not good a lot of the most recent trinkets have been. Even things like Engine of Eradication, which is incredibly powerful, is significantly weaker than a similar item level engine. So it's just,
it is.
I don't know. It's just a weird, like, I wish there were other talents or trinkets that were as good.
Right.
There just aren't.
Yeah, you have a normalized trinket sim on the AC Veins guide, for example, and you put them at 915. Granted, the Killdraden's Burning Butthole is always going to be at 970. Big deal. But it's funny to see that Six Feathered Fan, World Drop Trinket. Yeah, good luck. BTI, and then we have Spectre, Eye of Command, Chaos Talisman, Cradle, Arcana Crystal, Convergence. They're all so close, but it's the issue that Bloodthirsty Instinct is from the first raid in the expansion, as deep as we in now, and it's still that good if you get lucky enough.
Yeah, the thing with trinkets this expansion is universally, because of the item level thing, a lot of the times with trinkets, just for starters, never vendor any if you get them and it's a high enough item level. Just keep them, keep all of them.
Yeah.
And if you do a boss and you're feeling like, how do I eke out a bit more damage? Just try some of them. Just do a couple of pulls with that convergence on, see if you like the extra Maelstrom gen, because convergence is still pretty good. Maybe it lines up your wolves with burst AoE, so you can contribute a bit more. That's fine. Maybe you want a bit more flexible stat procs. Take a foci. Maybe people are dying sometimes and you can take advantage of memento. That's really good. Maybe you just want flat consistency. You can put on a Arcana Crystal. That's great. Like, having a lot of trinkets to try around is really healthy for when you're raiding, because you can just try them out and see where you can get a bit more, instead of relying on what's the best. Is this the best? I will only use this.
Yep. I want to make sure there's two little end caps that before we move on to the nitty gritty and bring in chat Q&A. The Convergence of Fate is basically being axed in 7.3. We don't know to what extent yet. People have said that it's basically being cut in half on all RPPMs, so use it while you have it. But again, we're not going to get the 7.3 patch for month and a half, 2 or whatever, so we'll see how long that takes. But it is on the horizon. They have talked about it, so it's happening for everyone across the board with that trinket, unfortunately. And the Nether Shard vendor on the Broken Isle, the Broken Shore rather, that is moving in the patch, and those 880 trinkets and the currency used on them is being removed. You can't get relinquished tokens anymore. So if you have any Nether Shards around, you're trying to like save up and farm for trinkets, because the 80 trinkets that can Titan Forge to whatever are from basically all of this stuff before Tomb. Use them now. Like save up before the patch drops, buy all of them now, and hope you get like a 925 Arcana or whatever have you, right? So don't hold them until the patch, because then they'll be gone. So use them beforehand. Use them beforehand. So now we'll bring up the nitty gritty. So community perception, representation, strength on progression, this kind of stuff. If you have any questions for Wordup and Rusah, please, now is your time. We have about, I don't know, 8 to 10 minutes or so we can sort of wrap this up with. I have a whole bunch of nonsense I wrote on the notes, but I guess we've been a little serious the whole show, so we'll bring up funny stuff. So how about favorite armor set? I guess Wordup, do you prefer the kilt or the pantsuit look for your enhancement shaman, your female orc?
I jump between either. I've got a lot of different sets to just put on. Try it. Depends how I'm feeling on the day.
But Rusah, you've been wearing the same pantsuit for a while now, eh?
My my opinions on this are apparently flawed, because my guild likes to tell me my transmogs are the worst ever. I like the whole. I generally like hunter tier more than shaman tier. I'm not a big fan of the dresses. I like the whole like armored elemental warrior kind of look. So like good example is one of my favorite sets is the and one that I use often is hunter Firelands tier, combined with some of the shaman tier, and it's a fun little like armored shaman warrior kind of look.
I'm ready. I like the tier 21 on the horizon. I'm ready to look like a troll elemental nameless king from Dark Souls. That looks. I don't know why the belt is red. I'm assuming it's just a color problem with the belt, but that kind of stuff. I'm a dress person though, the kilt or what do you want to say? Because the follow-up question to that is, why are you both not Pandaren? Because it's the best shaman.
No, it's because female orcs are thick, man. They've got nice face.
Wow.
I don't know why you aren't playing female orcs. Because come on.
Oh man. Gotta get that 3 toes from those trolls. No, I just like berserking as a cooldown. It lines up well. I didn't even pick it for an aesthetic reason. I just picked it. I picked troll for the racial.
Well, if I'm gonna go on the similar route with the thick comment from Wordup, is that I actually, if I played Horde, I would be female Tauren, because they look really good. Every time I get a female Tauren, that is the kill attempt. So they have just proportions of the Doom Hammer.
Female Tauren also have like a real shit-eating grin on the face when you zoom in. That's a really good thing about female Tauren too.
Taurens as a race, like you can actually see yourself when you're in a raid.
It's true.
Every now and then when I use like a gammon toy, it's like, oh, there I am, instead of just being in a giant pile of pets and people and melee DPS. Our Ret Paladin in our guild loves being a gigantic Tauren. He puts on every single size increase he can. You can see him from a mile away. Mechanics are happening. He's coming. It's funny.
Yeah. 8-minute Q&A on hairy females. Well, trolls aren't hairy. That's what Rusah plays. He's a female troll. But I get, the huge mohawks, I suppose. Yeah, and then Gale makes fun of Wordup for the female orcs have the worst combat sounds. I turn into a female orc sometimes and I make fun of it, like Orbital Deception. I'm like, oh, I'm senpai. But then I realize that, like, she's so loud. The female orc is so loud. Everything.
Oh, yeah. You can't miss it.
No, she's so angry all the time. But it's just an orc thing. Because male orc is also really angry too and really loud if you male orc it up. They both just talk a lot. But there we go. I don't think I see any questions in chat. I just don't play dwarves. Female dwarf, okay, but
sometimes. No.
Oh.
No, I'm not the person to ask about that. I staunchly do not like two-hand shaman or tank shaman. Those two things are not me. And maybe that's unpopular, but I don't like the whole two-hand thing.
Yeah, Doom Hammer clips pretty hard on male orcs. It goes through your body, like, because the way they stand, they're like holding it in their neck. That's true. Yeah. Hailstorm should have crazy good skilling with secondary stats. Do you think it'll become a thing again as eye level increases? It's already technically a thing now, if you can get above a certain reverse cliff haste point. Yeah. I'd probably say what's the mythic scaling on Simcraft? Is it 36% haste, and then you can go Hailstorm without AS? Rusah, what is that?
That's
again? Or is it?
Yeah,
40%?
That's 36% is what you want to look for. If you can nail that without Ancestral Swiftness, then you can take Hailstorm for a competitive option. I think it's, when I was putting that profile together, I want to say it was like a 7 or 8k DPS jump. But I mean, even if you don't take it, it's like maybe 5k DPS less. Depends on your stats. Sim it. You know, that's like our favorite thing to say in the Earthshrine Enhanced channel is sim it.
But not in a derogatory way. Don't take it badly. No, some people do.
Yeah, for Enhance, it's like a genuine, like, we don't have those kind of answers for you. Like, there's so many little pieces that work together. If you like Hailstorm, play Hailstorm. It's good. It's competitive. It's strong. It's not a dead talent.
Yeah, that's something.
If you really want to play Lightning Shield, play Lightning Shield.
Yeah, Rusah. Don't you say it.
We've really tried to like avoid doing this expansion is to just like be the place where it tells you to only do this always.
Oh yeah.
As soon as things started to become a bit more open, where there were choices, I've really tried to just convince people that there's choices and you can try them. It's not like the end of the world if it's not for you. Just give it a try. Like, please give it a try, because otherwise you start saying that you don't like a talent without knowing why you don't. And you start saying, like, oh, I don't like this because it's clunky. And then you ask, well, what do you mean by that? And then they go, well, I just don't like it.
We got that a lot with Overcharge. Like in 7.15 with Helya, when that patch came out, we got Fury of Air clunky, Overcharge clunky. Well, what don't you like about it? I just don't like it. Well, can you like put it in words? No, they just don't like it. It's like, well, then did you even try it? Like, they don't want to try it. It's maddening.
Well, there was a anti-fluidity feel to having both Overcharge and Fury of Air. I did it. You can watch my Mythic Helya kill video. I did that spec. Damage is fine, but I don't know if I was having super fun times during the whole time, because there's always the arguably times where you hit your Overcharge and you still have Maelstrom, but for some reason the tick rate of Fury of Air, it turns off, so you gotta turn it back on, then you gotta redo your weapon buffs, and Storm Strike procs, then Overcharges back up. Like, it was just not, it had anti-fluidity moments where you just like, I'm always catching up.
That's what I enjoyed about it strongly, because we went from 7.1, which had like zero Maelstrom management. You just ignored it and you hit your buttons, and if you didn't have enough Maelstrom, you just kept hitting buttons until you could, like, until you had Maelstrom again. Like, total drool cup, like brain dead. You just hit buttons.
Wow.
But in 7.15, it was fun because it made you think about Maelstrom. It made you think, 4 to 5 seconds ahead, several GCDs ahead. When can I safely Lava Lash? How much, how much Maelstrom do I need to save up for the Overcharge, Storm Strike, and refreshes? Like, I liked the whole thinking ahead planning thing. That was really fun for me. And that's not the case for everyone, and that's fine. If you don't like it, it's fine. But, if people can articulate that's why they don't like it,
The thing is with that, though, when people come to me and they say they don't like it and they don't want to play it, a lot of the time the answer is really simply, then don't play it. Because a lot of the time the talents are really close. And this isn't like a don't play it because I don't want to help you. The answer is genuinely don't play it, because the game is ultimately about having fun, and if you're intentionally playing something that makes you have less fun while you're using it, and you're forcing yourself to do it out of some arbitrary how much damage it's going to do, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you shouldn't be doing that.
Right. That's good. Oh, Northern Man brought up Cleanse Spirit. I mean, it's unfortunate that
it does have some uses.
Yeah, you can
if
do
you're
curses.
if you're playing Mythic Plus with like a Mistweaver, for instance, it can be useful.
Because I can't do curses. Yeah, it's true.
It actually, you know, it's funny. I say it can be useful, but so I was doing a Kara upper with a guildmate of mine who was playing on his Mistweaver alt, and he's like, "Hey, can you cleanse these debuffs?" And I was like, "That's not on my bars. That's not even keybound.
Wow.
Let me spellbook this real quick." So it's so rare. Like, I think that's the first time in the entire expansion someone like legitimately asked me to do that.
Well, we can close with Evil Axel before we give you guys some soapbox time, asking about why does my damage drop off like a truck as soon as I have to move from mechanics? I mean, we have to be hitting the bosses. We have no residual damage anymore. So
that happens to everyone.
Yeah, it happens to everyone.
If you have hard downtime, we really suffer from downtime. Because we're quite like, we're not really heavily front loaded like say a Ret is during Crusade. We do a bit of burst, but then we have like a pretty solid, like stable in between cooldowns period where we're doing constantly good damage. You go out of range for a bit, you're losing procs, you're losing globals, all of these things that are really valuable to us.
All your buffs are taken off.
Yep.
Melisande is a perfect example. Very first phase in Melisande, when she jumps away, is the perfect example of our weakness. She jumps away. There's, you know, all of our buffs are ticking off. Stormbringer's probably going to drop. We're not like other classes can be at least getting a cooldown towards another big ability or a shorter like class cooldown. Like Warrior's a good example. They can be getting closer to a Battle Cry or Colossus or Mortal Strike could be coming back up. Whereas for us, it's like it's a total reset. It's a hard, hey, you're starting the fight over again every time it happens.
And that's to expound on what Wordup says too, looking at now that we actually have a cooldown, because Feral Spirits, it's just a rotational ability, let's be honest. We actually have a cooldown now in Ascendance, either via gloves or via the talent itself, and in the same argument, Earth and Spike as a rotational short form cooldown. Other specs in the game that are more bursty have a higher burst window and then a lower fall off. Like look at like Havoc. When you put up Chaos Blades and Nemesis and Metamorphosis, your burst window is much higher than Enhancement Shaman. But once those all fall off, woo, they fall way down. Their smooth damage is way below. Enhancement only has like a 30-ish% like bump, and then we just go back down to where we were. So because we have less of a huge jump, our fall off is actually lessened. So you notice on certain fights, like mostly a lot of it is really hidden. Sisters of the Moon is a great enhancement fight because we won't burst as high as other specs. But by the end of that fight, if you're not like 1 or 2, then you may have just done something wrong. Because we just continuously tunnel into that boss nonstop that whole time. We will slowly climb up over anyone else. Just how the spec plays.
Yeah, that's the impact of downtime for us. But it also means that you don't feel like you're really just treading water until your next cooldown, which is part of the fun of the spec.
Yep. So I guess soapbox will wrap up time here. Rusah, you want first? I have your picture ready. I'll just bring it up on screen right now. We already said this. There it is. Just we just a moment of silence. Do you want a moment?
I'm waiting for it to come up.
There we go. Oh, it's been a little bit of delay. What are we looking at here, Rusah? What's this?
So for newer players or players that didn't play in Mists of Pandaria or didn't play in Enhancement Shaman, you probably saw this effect if you ever raided or played with Enhanced Shamans. This was the original iteration of Ascendance and Stormblast. We have been kind of joking at this about Rad Blast just because it looks so damn cool. You know, in this, so my whole soapbox is class fantasy. Legion was supposed to be the reset to class fantasy, but I feel like I felt more like a shaman in Mists of Pandaria with totems and elemental effects in MoP than I did in Legion. You know, this was supposed to be the expansion of going back to spec identity, and I just feel like an elemental warrior or an elemental rogue or an elemental monk, like that just hits Storm Strike and Lava Lash, and you know, it's. I feel like they kind of missed the mark on that. You know, I feel like there's a lot of really cool visual effects and impact that they could do for enhancement that either they just ran out of time or they didn't feel was a priority. We just don't feel like shamans anymore.
Yeah.
And I would really love it, Blizzard, if anybody's listening. There's no way you haven't heard someone say this. Please, at the very minimum, take that Stormblast animation and put it on Overcharge. I would play Overcharge over Tempest on every fight ever, and I would never take it off. It would be the most fun thing ever. Please.
I mean, there's one way to put you turned. There was like a fork in the road as Rusah was doing that, and I was like, he's gonna say the wrong thing, isn't he? And you totally did. No, just take this animation and just put it where Windstrike is. Just don't put the mastery scaling in. It already works fine.
How much would you piss off the rest of your raid members when all they see is like bish bish bish, like
they probably won't
like,
see.
What are you doing?
They probably won't see the full animation because of all the squelching that happens in raids. But that was
let's unsquelch specifically that.
Please, that would be cool. Like for a time when Stormlash wasn't unsquelched and everybody saw the cool lightning effect. But yeah, like I feel like all the class fantasy is missing. A
little bit.
I have a Doomhammer and I hit Stormstrike. I don't feel like a shaman. So
yeah, I would. My whole going back to the middle of the show thing is I want Rad Blast back as much as any of us for the Ascendance window. I also just really want the glyph, because as much as the Ascended form is fine, it's just janky and old. And using our new models and becoming a Lightning Panda and then hitting Rad Blast was just so good. I miss that so much. That is a huge crater that has been filled with not old god goop or whatever the stupid saying Ilganoth. Okay, word up. What's your soapbox, or what do you got? Closing statements.
I'm just gonna go with the same thing that I said on the BTS thing last night. That this is a bit more general as opposed to like just enhancement. But when a lot of people come to me, and I know for a few that I speak to a lot of people as well, they'll come to me and ask really, really hyper-specific questions for help. Like, do I need an extra 200 haste, or do I need to hit this breakpoint, or should I like change out this item for this item? And can you look at my logs? Should I change my gear and look at my armory? And a lot of the time, the answer isn't really like a super minutia answer that'll help you improve. Like you need 5% more uptime on your flame tongue. If you instead took that time of like an hour or 2 hours of you battering sims to get these really small little changes, if you spent that time hitting a dummy or doing LFR or doing a boss and just practicing mechanics until they go into the back of your head and you don't have to pay attention to them anymore, that'll be the much better investment of that time to improve. The best way to get better at all of the specs is not the minor, it's the practice. And I think that's something that's starting to get lost in Legion, when there's a lot of the really specific things that people ask for. They forget that just playing the game is how you get better at the game.
Okay. That's a really big end cap, because I've had a couple of people ask me on stream, and we'll debate and we'll talk about stuff on the broadcast, but I actually don't really know about going deeper than that. Like, I don't really want to log dive people, and I really can only learn so much about looking at your armory, because gear is sort of, as we went over the show multiple times, kind of like but it really comes down to enhancement is very muscle memory. I mean, after a while, once you learn the timings on abilities and how to react to certain things and weave it in, it becomes very much second nature. So what Word Up says is really true. I mean, practicing in a video game seems kind of weird, but it's
like I always
part of the game.
I liken it to when you look at people who play League, they spend a lot of time because I don't play it personally, but they spend a lot of time in the training area just practicing mechanics over and over again. They'll spend like an hour in the day just doing that. They'll spend it in the practice zone when they're playing CSGO. They'll practice mechanics like that. And the really, really high-end players, the people that you're wanting to emulate who are passing and doing that, they're all people who've done this. They've spent I spend 5-10 hours on a dummy like every couple of weeks or so, like over the space, just to make sure that when I'm playing, I don't need to think about, do I need to press Stormstrike? Do I need to do this? I'm not thinking about that, because when you don't have to think about that, you can look at the fight and you can say, oh man, in 5 seconds, I'm going to get a chance to abuse Crash Lightning here. So I need to be over here whilst I still do my rotation. That's the kind of thing that really improves you by far more than whether or not your gear's slightly more optimized, at least in my opinion.
It's like driving a car. At some point, car is just a tool, an extension of you.
Oh
As
no!
opposed to, I wasn't going there. I was just going with the tool car part.
That's a
You
good
could
one.
not correct it.
Couldn't help yourself.
That's a deep cut. Go check out the 725 Bay Talks with Wordup about Enhancement Shaman for that little nugget of goodness. Oh, that's so good. All right, well, I'm hitting this button, gentlemen. It's time to wrap this up. So thank you very much for tuning in to episode number 151 of Final Boss TV. Today was the Legion Enhancement Shaman show. Finally, we have Brewmaster Monk next week, and then a bit of a hiatus. And then we'll be back for BlizzCon pre and post, and then we'll go from there. But around the table real quick again, there's Rusah. He was the fresh meat today. You can go poke him in Discord at Rusah. Thank you for being on the show today, sir. All the math and stuff you work out with Ryeth and Genji. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Did you want to grab your Doge?
Oh,
for
yeah,
chat?
Marshall, come here. Oh, come here, buddy. Kazmodan was saying he saw my dog. Say hello, Marshall. You don't know what a webcam is, do you?
There we go, chat. We did it. And there's Wordup over there with his pirate facial hair. You can follow him on Twitter at Vaughn_Wordup and other places on the internet. Thank you for being on the show again, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good to be back again. You never know what I'm going to look like next time.
No. we brought up like old pictures. We were setting the show up right now, and there's like a progression of like, who is this kid in here? And yeah, but I think, I don't know, chat, thumbs up, thumbs down on Wordup's facial hair. What do you think? We'll get it.
I'm not happy about that one.
But that's going to be it for this episode. Again, Brewmaster next week, and then a break if you have any questions, of course, for shows. If you are in the Discord channel, the general chat, I usually ping it if you want to grab questions for me that week. Of course, I'm really easy to get in touch with. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all down below the stream. Of course, if you want to support the show, there's the Patreon, the BTS podcasts now. The first 12 of them are at the Any Pledge. So $1 is all you need to do to get 12 extra podcasts if you'd like to, or the other rewards on there. Of course, you can always subscribe to here up here on the Twitch channel, or if you're on YouTube, the subscribe button's like down there or something, the red one. That works too. But trusting your Seal of Artifact power, the grind is coming back with the Netherlight Crucible, so be ready for that again. But until next week, everybody, bye! Bye! Wave bye by these people! Wave bye! Wave bye! Oh, there you go.
I'm not very good at waving, you know that, man.
Terrible.